Chapter 1179. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Stepping onto the sixth platform, the essence energy was locked in the body. Although it couldn't be released, it could be transmitted through the body. On the fourth platform, Qin Hao had used this method to place his palm on Xiao Han's back and set up a layer of red lotus fire barrier to block her stage 3 Origin Emperor aura. Her external appearance was only that of a half-step Origin Emperor. Now that the tranquil water had entered her body, a majestic vitality flowed through her meridians. Her exhausted energy was recovered, and the pressure on Xiao Han was greatly reduced. "Brother Qin Hao, if I can't hold on anymore, you can leave me behind and go to the sixth platform," Xiao Han said as she walked. Every step consumed a lot of energy. Every time he ascended the stone steps, the pressure increased exponentially. The pressure on the sixth platform was unusually strong. Compared to the previous platforms, it was very abrupt. Xiao Han didn't understand why. She could only sigh. Since it was set up by the Spirit Emperor, there was no room for negotiation. If she didn't want to walk, she could give up. Qin Hao didn't reply. He only held Xiao Han's hand tightly. With every step, more tranquil water poured into Xiao Han's body. Gradually, Qin Hao's head was covered in sweat. It was no longer sweat, but bean-sized beads. He wasn't just exhausting his energy, but also his essence energy. Li Wanji was constantly observing Qin Hao. Seeing him take care of Xiao Han, he couldn't help but smile, but he didn't stop him. He also wanted to see how long Qin Hao could last with Xiao Han, or whether he could successfully step onto the sixth platform. If Xiao Han was a burden, Qin Hao could still stand on the sixth platform. That would prove that he was qualified to challenge the seventh platform. Li Wanji was waiting for that moment. He was waiting for someone who could defeat the seventh platform for him. Once the seventh platform was defeated and the entire Coiling Dragon Wonder was activated, a miracle would appear in front of the tens of thousands of people at the foot of the mountain when the dragon roared and took to the sky. That would be the real Coiling Dragon Wonder. Li Wanji had been waiting for this moment for hundreds of years. The pressure on the sixth stone step is so abnormal. It doesn't make sense at all. Yamazaki, who had returned to the fifth stage, rested for a while. His complexion improved a lot as he raised his head and looked up. The old demon, the coffin bearer, and the old man with the broken sword all stopped midway and sat where they were, looking extremely miserable. However, Qin Hao's legs were nimble and he continued to move forward. Yamazaki couldn't help but feel extremely depressed. Of those two women, one has already stepped 200 feet away, while the other still has the strength to move forward. Her aptitude is somewhat terrifying, the gray-robed subordinate said. He seemed to understand why the young master admired Xiao Han so much. If such a talented girl entered the Ning family and was given special training, her future achievements would be extraordinary. At the very least, he wouldn't be any worse than Ning Chaofan. It was the young master's vision that had truly been passed down to him. Ning Chaofan's face twitched. He had never thought that Xiao Han and Kei would be able to go so far. Previously, he had been pestering them because he was greedy for their beauty. What a pity, Ning Chaofan said and deliberately sighed. Since his subordinate praised his vision, he might as well go along with his subordinate's wishes and show that his vision was extraordinary. The so-called pity was obviously Ning Chaofan's jealousy that Qin Hao had such an outstanding woman like Xiao Han accompanying him. It was really like a fresh flower stuck in cow dung. The outstanding beauty was eaten by trash. Ning Chaofan was extremely angry. They won't really step onto the sixth stage, right? The black-robed subordinate beside Xianyuan Chemical said with a worried tone. Almost everyone had lost the right to challenge. If Qin Hao stepped onto the sixth stage, he would obtain an extraordinary opportunity, which would be disadvantageous to Xianyuan Chemical. So if he steps on it, no matter what great fortune he obtains, it will all be in vain in the end. Xianyuan Chemical wasn't worried at all. He smiled and looked at the old man with the broken sword and the coffin bearer. At this time, the old man with the broken sword and the coffin bearer looked at Qin Hao and Xiao Han with unfriendly eyes. Refusing to exchange the scabbard was tantamount to slapping the old man's face. How could he tolerate it? The old scabbard was an ancient scabbard that the old man with the broken sword was determined to get. Similarly, the coffin bearer wouldn't let go of Kair's peacock plume. This was undoubtedly a death sentence for Qin Hao. Perhaps Xianyuan Chemical didn't need to do anything. Qin Hao would disappear from the world. In this way, when he returned home, he would naturally be able to brag that he had personally avenged his younger brother. He would definitely be the next city lord of Ao Chun City. Thinking of this glorious scene, Xianyuan Chemical couldn't help but smile. Brother Qin Hao, I can't go on anymore. Put me down. Sweat flowed down the front of her clothes, and blood surged in her body. Xiao Han's legs were almost in a state of numbness. If Qin Hao hadn't held her, she would have collapsed to the ground. There are still 10 feet left. Xiao Han, hold on, Qin Hao said with heartache. He gathered his soul essence and poured an even more majestic stream of tranquil water into Xiao Han's body. Don't waste your strength for me. You can't withstand the pressure of the 6th platform, Xiao Han couldn't help but say. Even with the tranquil water flowing into her body, Xiao Han's foundation was weak. Compared to Qin Hao, who cultivated the art of indestructible samsara and had a demigod body, there was a huge difference. And this difference wasn't something the tranquil water could make up for. 90 feet. Believe me, you can do it. Heavy. Very heavy on the legs. Qin Hao continued to climb higher and higher, constantly consuming his origin energy. This caused Qin Hao's exhaustion to become heavier and heavier. His white robes were drenched in sweat. The feeling of being hit by a mountain made it extremely difficult for Qin Hao to walk. Kid, if you leave her behind, you'll obtain a great fortune. Li Wanji's cold eyes swept over, a smile on his face. He finally saw Qin Hao's fatigue. It turned out that this kid wasn't made of steel. Shut your mouth, and you'll also obtain a great fortune. Qin Hao's breathing was very heavy. His eyes were wet with sweat, and his vision was blurry. The platform in front of him was getting closer and closer, but it seemed so vast and distant. But it was impossible to give up on Xiao Han. Big brother Qin Hao, you fool. Xiao Han pursed her lips and bit the tip of her tongue. She sprayed a layer of blood, mist onto the jade pendant around her neck. Immediately, a hazy halo bloomed from the jade pendant. It was like a robe with holy light flowing around it. It covered Xiao Han's body and reduced the pressure on her. You have a trump card? Li Wanji was slightly surprised. Then, he smiled as if it had nothing to do with him and continued forward. There were still 70 feet ahead. You won't be satisfied if you don't bring me to the 6th platform, right? Fool, you're a fool. Let go of me. Xiao Han suddenly exerted force, and her small hand escaped from Qin Hao's palm. She couldn't consume any more of Big Brother Qin Hao's soul power. Otherwise, he would become weaker and weaker, and his spirit would become more and more dispirited. But that didn't mean that Xiao Han didn't have a trump card. It was just that she really didn't want to waste the divine power in the jade pendant unless it was a critical moment. This divine power was limited. She smiled at the absent-minded Qin Hao. Then, as the holy light flowed, Xiao Han, who seemed to have put on a new robe, walked more and more briskly. She even ran in front of Qin Hao. This girl, Qin Hao shook his head. It turned out that Han wasn't as weak as he thought. Looking at her brisk steps, Qin Hao gathered another streak of soul power. A dragon's roar sounded in his body, and a thin layer of golden light appeared on the surface of his body. From afar, it looked like a set of battle armor. At this moment, Qin Hao, who had awakened 2 souls, was no longer exhausted. His body was full of energy, and his steps became more and more firm. He ignored the pressure of the stone steps, and with every step, it was as if he was breaking an obstacle. He followed closely behind Xiao Han, and in a spurt of energy, they both climbed to the 6th platform. What? He actually did it? Below, Ning Chaofan and the rest were all shocked. Each of them stood upright, and their eyes were filled with disbelief. Please remember the domain name of this book, 9 Heavens Divine Emperor Mobile Edition website. Chapter 1180. Chantian. Primordial Alchemy Venerable. Chapter 1180. Return unraveling the mystery of Kailong. They had personally experienced how terrifying the pressure on the sixth platform was. It had seriously exceeded the limits of what they could endure. The coffin-carrying man and the old man with the broken sword had only covered less than 200 feet. They could not imagine what kind of unyielding perseverance Qin Hao, who was regarded as a good-for-nothing with luck, had climbed to the sixth platform that everyone looked up to but was afraid of. Was it really luck? Was he really a piece of trash? At this moment, Ning Chaofan felt a burning sensation on his face. A voice seemed to echo in his mind. The person who was truly trash was him. Everyone look, someone has stepped onto the sixth platform. There's more than one. My God, it's not Xianyuan Chemical from Proud Spring City, nor is it Ning Chaofan from Golden Light City, who is proficient in both the Tao of formations and the Tao of inscriptions. Gradually, many martial artists below also arrived at the fifth platform through their efforts. They looked at the two figures standing on the sixth platform with peerless elegance, and their hearts fell into a long period of shock. This was the first time that someone had stood on the sixth stage of the Coiling Dragon spectacle. However, it wasn't Xianyuan Chemical from the Proud God Nation's Imperial Branch. Neither was Ning Chaofan, who was regarded as the #1 genius of the Ning family in Golden Light City, who excelled in both inscriptions and formations. Instead, they were two inconspicuous, nameless martial artists whose origins were unknown. At this moment, the white-haired martial artist's name was destined to spread throughout the southern domain. Qin Hao's brilliance completely overshadowed the martial Ning Empire's and Proud God Nation's imperial family successors. This kid isn't as bad as he looks on the surface. The coffin-carrying man was also watching. He sneered in his heart. He kind of understood why the seventh prince of the Li family, who dominated Bayo, would go through so much trouble to find him and get rid of that white-haired warrior. That white-haired martial artist had an extraordinary aptitude. It's been 800 years. This day has finally come, Li Wanji said to himself. He was so excited that his body was trembling. He could not hide the joy on his face. Seeing that Qin Hao and Xiao Han were standing on the sixth platform, he also stepped onto it without hesitation. If someone were to ask, why didn't Li Wanji go up in the past? He clearly had a great opportunity. He could have been the first to break the record and laugh proudly at the sixth stage, but he had given up on it several times. It was only today that Li Wanji stepped onto the sixth platform after someone had already won the first prize. He would surely answer. It was precisely because no one had ascended the platform earlier, and the young geniuses and experts of over 10 generations of the Southern Territory were forcefully suppressed on the fifth platform like ants. That was why Li Wanji didn't go up, because even if he went up, he didn't have the ability to activate the entire Coiling Dragon Wonder. Was the Coiling Dragon Wonder just a holy land for martial artists to raise their realms? Just a place of historical interest for people to admire spirit emperors' enchantment techniques? Wrong. It was nothing more than a coat. Inside, there was another world, shocking universe. Honor, we did it! Qin Hao was overjoyed. He wiped off the sweat on his head and looked at the clouds in the distance. He felt a sense of accomplishment. Even though he possessed the body of a demigod, he still had to expend about 60% of his dragon soul power upon stepping onto the sixth platform. At this moment, not only was the serene, cleansing water soul very weak, but the water elemental energy stored in his dantian was almost depleted. Even his dragon soul was in a state of extreme fatigue. He had to admit that climbing this wonder was even more difficult than fighting with Zhou Wudao. It was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Looking at the rock wall not far ahead, the thick white fog blocking the rock wall gradually retreated to the sides. Qin Hao pulled Xiao Han's hand and prepared to go over to observe together. But in the next moment, the halo covering Xiao Han's body suddenly collapsed. Her body went limp, and she collapsed in Qin Hao's arms. Her face was extremely pale, and she could barely open her eyes. Honor! Qin Hao was shocked. I'm so tired. Brother Qin Hao, the rest is up to you. Xiao Han said weakly. A smile appeared on her bloodless face. She finally accompanied Qin Hao to the sixth platform. How could this be? Qin Hao placed his hand on Xiao Han's wrist and felt that although she did not show any signs of injury, her body's primordial energy was almost depleted. Although I don't know what trump card she used to temporarily offset the pressure from the peak of the mountain. But in order to encourage you to reach the peak of the mountain as you wish, she has already used all her strength and almost risked her life to follow you. Li Wanji glanced at Xiao Han with emotion. This lady was extremely affectionate. He really did not know what kind of luck this white-haired boy had to meet such a good girl. Along the way, Li Wanji saw Ning Chaofan's adoration and pestering of Xiao Han. With Ning's power in the southern region, even if the other party was only a disciple of a branch family, he was still the son of a mighty lord. In the future, he would inherit his father's business and have considerable authority in Ningwu Kingdom. Such a status could not move Xiao Han at all. Instead, she chose to follow Qin Hao wholeheartedly. What ability did Qin Hao have? Was his family more powerful than the Ning family? Li Wanji did not know, but he did not doubt that if it was another girl at the foot of the mountain, she would have kicked Qin Hao away and happily thrown herself into Ning Chaofan's arms. Now, even if she relied on her trump card to reach the sixth platform, her weak foundation made her unable to move forward. Moreover, with Xiao Han's extremely weak mental state, it was even less possible for her to comprehend the rock wall. Silly girl. Qin Hao's heart ached. It turned out that everything Han did was for him. If it's for her own good, you should stop tormenting yourself. Hurry up and open the entire coiling dragon treasure trove. Only then can you live up to her efforts. Li Wanji sighed and slowly walked to the sixth platform's rock wall. Brother Qin Hao, I believe in you. Since young, I have always believed in you. So what if the spiritual energy empowerment fails? What can a useless key prove? You're already standing on the sixth platform, leaving those self-righteous people behind. Next, let them witness your brilliance. Xiao Han used what little strength he had left to push Qin Hao's chest. He couldn't bear to waste any of his time. Wait for me. Qin Hao leaned over and kissed Xiao Han's forehead. He helped her sit down slowly and adjusted her breath. Then, he turned around and stepped toward the rock wall with hot blood. His fists clenched tighter and tighter. This time, he would not disappoint the old demon and the others. I'll wait for you. Xiao Han smiled sweetly and watched her man walk away. Then, she endured the exhaustion of her vitality and slowed down her movements. She began to adjust her breath and breathe in the spiritual energy of heaven and earth to nourish her body. The fourth platform's spiritual energy empowerment allowed a martial artist's realm to soar. The fifth platform allowed one to comprehend the divine soldier and comprehend a supreme treasure. How great would the sixth platform's opportunity be? Could Brother Qin Hao's opportunity make up for the gap between the previous two platforms and the others? Xiao Han was looking forward to it. However, when Qin Hao really stepped in front of the rock wall, her expectations were dashed. The rock wall of the sixth platform was empty. There was nothing. Qin Hao was suddenly startled. Gradually, anger burned on his face. Looking at the empty rock wall, he felt like he had been deceived. Boy, do you believe me? Li Wanji's voice sounded beside him. What do you mean? Qin Hao looked at him coldly. When he turned his head, he saw that the smile on Li Wanji's face had disappeared. What was left was a suffocating deepness, as well as excitement and madness hidden in the depths of his eyes. Chapter 1181. Qian. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The Emperor Soul's might Li Wanji didn't answer. He walked to Qin Hao's side and looked up at the peak. Above, there was still a thick fog that didn't disperse. The thick fog blocked the view of the peak. Li Wanji chuckled. He raised his arm and waved it gently. The white fog suddenly dispersed mysteriously. Instantly, the situation at the peak of Coiling Dragon Mountain was revealed to him. What? Qin Hao's heart sank. It was as if he was hit by a hammer. He was dumbfounded. Looking at the peak, there was nothing. There were no longer stone steps, no rumored seventh platform, and no murals. Other than a few stalks of weak grass swaying in the wind, the peak was bare. It was made up of dark, heavy, and rough stones. Qin Hao suddenly realized something. He turned around and looked down. His gaze landed on the fifth platform. The fifth platform's murals depicted the dragon's shoulders. Based on this, he should be standing on the dragon's neck. However, there was nothing on the sixth platform. In other words, the giant dragon that coiled up from the foot of the mountain was headless. It was a headless dragon. Shock. At this moment, Qin Hao's spirit was crazily devoured. Fighting his exhaustion, he activated his three souls at the same time and stared at Li Wanji as if he was facing a great enemy. If he still couldn't sense that something was wrong with Li Wanji, then it would have lived in vain. Let your guard down. The headless dragon has nothing to do with me. When the Spirit Emperor enchanted the entire coiling dragon wonder, he used a concealment technique to erase the dragon's head. If you believe me, use all your strength to activate your spiritual grade and find where the dragon's eyes are hidden. Activate the dragon's eyes on an empty mountain peak. Once the dragon's eyes are opened, the dragon's head will appear and the seventh platform will be born. Li Wanji said calmly. Only a trace of treachery flashed in the depths of his eyes. He would never tell Qin Hao that the giant dragon was headless. The Spirit Emperor didn't use a concealment technique on a mountain peak, and there was no so-called seventh platform. His goal was to have Qin Hao draw the eyes of the headless dragon. The location of the dragon's eyes was the key to activating the entire coiling dragon formation. Once the formation on the mountain was fully activated, the real wonder would appear and lead to the hidden treasure, the hidden dragon secret realm. Li Wanji suddenly looked over and urged Qin Hao, "We don't have much time left. The spiritual qi of the mountain peak is limited due to the suppression of the spell formation. If you don't act now, not only will your female companion, but everyone else on the sixth step will be crushed to powder." Old Demon and the others had fallen too deep into the sixth stage. They had lost too much energy and were unable to return. However, the pressure on the sixth stage was still increasing crazily. Qin Hao might not care about the lives of the coffin bearer and the old man with the broken sword, but Li Wanji believed that he would not ignore the death of his companions. In order to prove his words, when Qin Hao turned around to look at Xiao Han, he found that Xiao Han's breathing was getting more and more rapid. Her delicate body, which was sitting cross-legged, seemed to be violently pressed by an external force. She trembled and blood flowed from her nostrils and mouth. Her face was getting paler and paler. She was in a critical situation. "If you lie to me, you will die." Qin Hao's angry eyes could swallow Li Wanji. He clenched his teeth and said. Li Wanji smiled faintly and extended his hand to make a pleased gesture. Whoosh. Next, Qin Hao took a deep breath and emptied his body. He forced his spiritual power to concentrate and looked up. There was nothing above him except for a pile of big rocks. The dragon body under his feet, with a headless thing. What he needed to do was to listen to Li Wanji and release his powerful spiritual power to find the dragon's eyes that the Spirit Emperor had hidden. The ancient times are mysterious and boundless. The pill shakes the world. Wherever I go, all things will fall open. With a domineering roar, Qin Hao did not hesitate. For the first time, he drew out his spiritual power and tried to fully release his emperor-level spiritual power. At this moment, his entire soul felt like it was about to shatter. The Spirit Emperor was a giant in the artifact refining world. He had been famous for a long time, and his seniority might even be higher than Qin Hao's in his previous life. Although Qin Hao had never heard of this person in his previous life, he did not doubt that the other party's cultivation was not something an ordinary Emperor-level powerhouse could compare to. If he did not activate his Emperor-level spiritual power, Qin Hao did not have the confidence to find the hidden dragon's eyes from the empty mountain peak. However, if he did not hold back and released his spiritual power, Qin Hao would face the possibility of his body collapsing and his soul drifting into the river of time with his weak physical body and weak cultivation. Even if he did not die, it would be extremely difficult to recover. He might have to spend another few decades, or even a few hundred years before he could rebuild the spiritual energy of all things. But he had no choice. Perhaps the person who died would be Shao Han, Kerr, or the old demon who had always been with him. Roar, roar, woof. Sensing that Qin Hao was facing an unprecedented challenge and that he was actually thinking of unsealing the huge soul from his previous life, the dog spirit in the infinite space ring roared restlessly. It was the only one who knew all of Qin Hao's secrets. Only Brother Dog knew how powerful Dendi was in his previous life. It could be said that once Qin Hao released all of his Emperor spirit, it would definitely cause a stir in this area. This could possibly attract other Emperor-level powerhouses. In the worst-case scenario, he would be half dead. Quiet, Qin Hao said in a low voice. At this moment, there was no room for any noise. Woo, the dog spirit whined, and then there was no more sound. Until now, I have not released all of my spiritual power. You are very lucky to have seen it, but it is also very unfortunate because you might be torn apart by my spiritual power. Qin Hao bared his teeth and gave Li Wanji a coarse smile. At this moment, his smile revealed incomparable determination and confidence. It was as if the him from back then had returned. Li Wanji shrugged, looking unconcerned. Tear his soul apart? He felt that Qin Hao's courage was commendable, but in the next second, Li Wanji could not remain calm. There was a loud crack, as if thunder from the ninth heaven had struck the sky, and the world trembled. As Qin Hao's boundless spiritual power was released layer by layer, the clear day became incomparably gloomy, and the spiritual energy within a radius of nearly 10,000 miles went berserk. A mass of dark clouds that was enough to swallow the earth and swallow the entire mountain peak appeared almost without warning above tens of thousands of people's heads. In tens of thousands of pairs of eyes that were widening, the dark clouds went crazy and gradually turned into a violent vortex. A fierce wind swept up to the foot of the mountain like a wandering wind dragon and spiraled towards Qin Hao's position at the peak of the mountain. Buzz! A layer of spiritual power spread out from the mountain peak, and the power was so great that it covered the entire source of the South River, and then spread towards the proud God Nation and the alliance of 10,000 cultivators. It swept all the way like a hurricane, swallowing half of the proud God Nation and almost the entire alliance of 10,000 cultivators. Even the border of the martial Ning Empire to the south of the South River was affected. Every living creature that was enveloped by the net had a splitting headache, and they rolled on the ground like crazy, letting out hoarse howls. It was as if thousands of troops and horses were galloping in their minds, and war drums were soaring to the sky. At this moment, the entire southern region was in chaos. Chapter 1182. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The southern region was in turmoil. All the experts in the area covered by Qin Hao's spiritual power were alarmed. The more powerful the person was, the greater the impact. Some of the Emperor stage experts who had sealed their cultivation to reduce the consumption of their lifespan were also awakened from their seclusion. In a remote mountainous area, in the back mountain of Lantian village between two hills, there were two figures. The owner of Star Refining Tower, Gu Huangshou, and the half-step Dendi, Qing Lao. After bidding farewell to Qin Hao, they returned to their old residence and stayed in the village for half a month to meet the descendants of their old friends. Then, they returned to the back mountain to pick the Blue-Silver Emperor. On this day, the two of them were preparing to return. Suddenly, the sky darkened. Thunder clouds rolled in the sky, and strong winds swept across the mountain stream. The birds and beasts were frightened, as if the end of the world was coming. What's going on? Master Gu looked up at the strange sky. At this time, an inexplicable pressure suddenly attacked him. The pressure was so strong that he had never seen it before. It was too shocking. He couldn't resist it in time and spat out a mouthful of blood on the ground. His mind was in a mess, as if it was invaded by an external spirit. His soul felt like it was being torn apart. He hugged his head and screamed. Gu Huangshou, a 7th stage origin emperor, couldn't bear it at all. Little Huang. Seeing this, Qing Lao hurriedly took out a spirit-suppressing pill and fed it to him. His palms changed and formed a strong seal, setting up a faint platinum barrier to cover the two of them. Only then did it weaken the spiritual power that Qin Hao spread. However, inside the barrier, they could still clearly feel the spiritual power that was sweeping across the outside world. The strength of this spiritual power was far beyond what Qing Lao could compare to. He could only be like a frightened rabbit, firmly guarding his mind and shrinking inside the barrier to avoid angering the other party. Brother Qing, this spiritual power field is so terrifying. Who is it? Gu Huangsho said in fear. His eyes were full of horror as he looked outside the barrier. After taking a 9th-grade tranquil spirit pill, his damaged telegnosis ability was strengthened and repaired in a short time. He could still feel the stabbing pain in his head, even though he was hiding inside the barrier laid down by Qing Lao. Strong. Just a wave of mental strength was enough to injure an almighty blacksmith. The mental strength of a blacksmith was far beyond that of an ordinary martial artist. One could easily imagine how powerful the other party's cultivation was. He was at least a 9-star martial monarch, and a peak 9-star martial monarch on top of that. The number of 9-star emperors in the southern region could be counted on one's fingers. Emperor Gu could not guess who did it. Qing Lao was different. Qing Lao was half a step away from becoming Dendi. His horizons and level of communication were much higher than Gu Huangsho's. I'm not sure either. Qing Lao shook his head. He did know some emperor-level friends, but this spiritual aura was very unfamiliar. It didn't seem like the secluded ancestors of the Ning family, the Li family, or the Xianyuan family. The emperor-level experts of the Ning family, the Li family, and the Xianyuan family had their own special aura. Although Qing Lao was not familiar with them, and was even hostile to the Xianyuan family, he knew very well that the owner of this spiritual aura did not belong to the 3 strongest families in the southern region. It seems that another monstrous martial monarch has appeared in the southern region. Moreover, this martial monarch seems to be in a state of rage. I wonder who angered him. Who will be the next unlucky one? Emperor Gu said. He took a deep breath and sat down to meditate quietly. Anyway, he was not the unlucky one. However, Qing Lao stood still as if he was thinking. He looked up at the strange phenomenon in the sky with his brows tightly knitted. Why did he feel that the chaotic soul magnetic field in the outside world was vaguely familiar? Could it be that he had met the owner of this terrifying soul before? Qing Lao could not remember clearly because he would never associate this power with Qin Hao. The same scene happened in the Ningwu Empire and the Northern Pride Li family. Looking at the sudden phenomenon of heaven and earth and the soul magnetic field that swept across the land. In the depths of the imperial palace of the Ningwu Empire and the Northern Pride Li family's imperial palace, several stalwart figures stood there. Their aura was strong, and they were all emperor-level experts. Emperor Ningwu calmly observed for a long time. Then a light came out of the ancestral tomb and flew into his mind. He shouted, "Men, go and find the location of the owner of this chaotic soul. The ancestor has ordered that we treat him with the respect of an emperor. We must not anger him." Yes, several voices shouted as they received the order. 3 streams of platinum light flew out of the Ningwu Empire's imperial palace. Each of them was at the emperor level, and their strengths were different. They flew in the direction where the soul came from and went straight to the source of the southern river. Due to the fact that this force was too strong, it was not suitable to tier space and teleport. Otherwise, they might be sucked into the spatial turbulence and never return. The Northern Pride Li family. The head of the Li family, the emperor in charge of the Northern Pride, was a dignified, middle-aged man in a dragon robe. He stood in the study room in fear and trepidation, facing a short, old man with sparse hair who was meditating on a dragon table. From his appearance, the old man was lifeless, like a dead man who had climbed out of a coffin. But even the strongest leader of the Li family in this generation was like a grandson, terrified in front of the old man. Ancestor, the chaotic soul force outside actually alarmed you. It's really my fault." Hearing this, the old man opened his eyes and said in a weak voice, "Go and investigate immediately. Remember, treat him with respect. Even if he doesn't agree, you must be respectful. Don't anger him." The Northern Pride Emperor was shocked. He himself was a peak 8-stage Emperor Yuan, only half a step away from becoming a 9-star emperor. The ancestor opposite him had lived for more than 1,000 years. His cultivation was terrifying and unfathomable. Their Northern Pride family was one of the strongest overlords in the southern region. Only the Southern Pride Xianyuan clan could rival them. Even the Ningwu imperial family and the Li family didn't take them seriously. The ancestor actually told him not to anger the owner of this soul. "I understand now." After being absent-minded for 2 seconds, the Northern Pride Emperor nodded solemnly. Since the ancestor said so, it was enough to prove that the owner of the chaotic soul outside was probably not much worse than the ancestor. Such a powerhouse could no longer be restrained by the rules of the secular world, because as long as the other party was willing, he could do whatever he wanted. He couldn't even control an emperor-level powerhouse, unless it was a god with the power of law. "I will send someone to invite him. Come," the Northern Pride Emperor shouted. "No, you have to go personally. Remember, treat him with respect. Otherwise, even I can't protect you. In addition, we are not recruiting him, but forming an alliance with him," the ancestor of the Northern Pride Emperor reminded. Boom! The Northern Pride Emperor was shocked again. His eyes widened as if he had seen a ghost in front of him. He was the emperor of the empire, and it was an invitation, so he had to treat him respectfully. What made the Northern Pride Emperor even more unbearable was that the ancestor said that if he angered the other party, even the ancestor himself couldn't protect him. The Northern Pride Emperor himself was a peak 8th-stage Emperor Yuan, the ruler of one side of the continent. Why did the ancestor say that he was a weak baby? Please remember the domain name of this book. 9 Heavens Divine Emperor Mobile Edition website. Chapter 1183. Qianqian. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Chapter 1183. Qianqian Earth in the Ancestral Mausoleum. It's not that the heavenly Tao won't take revenge, it's just that it's not time yet. The calamity of Proud South is coming. Its fate has come to an end. The day of Proud, North unifying Proud God, is just around the corner. Yuan this time, our Li family's golden age has finally arrived. Looking at his dazed great-grandson, Proud North's old ancestor left behind a profound sentence before disappearing silently from the dragon table. Could this terrifying aura be him? Or perhaps his successor? Li Xiaoxing had lived for 1,200 years. He naturally recognized this aura. 600 years ago, at the Divine Wilderness Emperor's Banquet, where all 9-star emperors gathered, he had witnessed the peerless figure of the owner of this aura. Although he was also a 9-star great emperor at that time, Li Xiaoxing was also dumbfounded by Denda's shocking knowledge. He was convinced wholeheartedly. Unfortunately, the heavens were jealous of geniuses. Dende, who had shocked the world with his alchemy skills, was schemed against by a villain, besieged by heroes, and finally died in the 9 Heavens God's punishment formation. The moment he heard that Qin Hao had fallen, Li Xiaoxing, who was in Proud North, was greatly shocked. But other than sighing, he could not do anything. Until later, there was a rumor that Dende, who had fallen in the God Burial Valley, only had a skeleton left, but no consciousness was left. At that moment, Li Xiaoxing was almost certain that Dende might still be alive. Now, this aura that was sweeping across Proud North was like Dende in the past. No, there was still a slight difference between the two. Li Xiaoxing could feel that this aura was not enough. It was still a little weak compared to Dende in the past. But faintly, it had the embryonic form of catching up to Dende. And in terms of aura, it seemed to have greater potential. This made Li Xiaoxing have no doubt that Xianyuan family was about to meet its end. Who asked Xianyuan Wutian, that muddle-headed old man, to participate in the stupid matter of besieging Dende? Retribution had finally come. This person must be found. I want to see what kind of celestial saint he is. As the ancestor left, he left behind a sentence. Nan Ao's tribulation has arrived. His fate has come to an end. At this moment, Li Yuan felt the blood in his entire body boil. He was so excited that he trembled. The old ancestor had lived for 1,000 years. He had great foresight and was a man of great strategy. He would never make empty promises. This meant that the Xianyuan family had indeed provoked a calamity. An emperor-stage powerhouse that could shake the foundation of Nan'ao was worthy of Li Yuan putting down his status as the emperor to invite him. He glanced at the dragon robe on his body. His primordial chi shook violently and tore it into pieces. Then he took out a set of ordinary green robes from his spatial ring and put it on. With a smile on his face, he turned into a stream of light and flew into the sky. Since he was going to invite them, it would be too insincere to wear a dragon robe. At the same time, when a Li family's old ancestor was awakened, Nan'ao Xianyuan family, Xianyuan Wuqian, the Gravity Emperor, who had been hiding behind the scenes for 1,000 years and was recognized as the strongest expert in the southern region, was also one of Qin Hao's mortal enemies. He also woke up from his coffin in the ancestral mausoleum. Rumble. In the ancestral mausoleum of the Xianyuan family, a black coffin with 9 dragons suddenly exploded in a catacomb. Then, a skinny old man who was lying in a broken coffin and holding a jar in his arms suddenly sat up like a corpse coming to life. This aura, it's him. Xianyuan Wutian's sunken and dark eye sockets were filled with an abnormal fear. When Qin Hao's aura swept across the sky above the ancestral mausoleum of the Xianyuan family, Xianyuan Wutian, who was in a state of suspended animation, could no longer be at peace. His divine soul immediately returned to his body and integrated into his body. He reappeared in the world from the 9-dragon coffin that was nourishing his lifespan. That's right, it's him. This extremely familiar aura had appeared in Xianyuan Wutian's nightmares several times. Even when he was in seclusion, he could not be at peace. It had been 600 years. Because he often had nightmares, his cultivation did not improve. Instead, it was stable. Every time he woke up from a nightmare, it consumed a lot of his lifespan. At this moment, Xianyuan Wutian could clearly recognize that this aura carried a majestic vitality. He knew that he was not dreaming. Come, who is the patriarch of this generation of the Xianyuan family? Immediately check the aura that shrouded the ancestral mausoleum. Immediately check and kill him. Kill this person at all costs. Xianyuan Wutian roared desperately, panicking to the extreme. When his roar spread out, it fiercely bombarded the Xianyuan family's palace. Immediately, 6 platinum emperor-level vitality rose from the ground and turned into ribbon-like rays of light that flew out. With a simple order, 6 emperor yuans were dispatched. It could be seen how terrifying the foundation of the Xianyuan family was, and how supreme Xianyuan Wutian's right to speak was. His words were the divine decree. Old ancestor, you came out of seclusion. When the 6 platinum aura flames rose into the sky, the emperor of Southern Ao, the current patriarch of the Xianyuan family, appeared in the ancestral mausoleum in an instant. He looked at the broken coffins all over the ground, as well as the old ancestor who was sitting in the middle of the coffins, holding the urn and looking deranged. The emperor of Southern Ao was pleasantly surprised. That person is still alive. How can I be at peace? Xianyuan Wutian shouted. That person? Who is that person? The emperor of Southern Ao asked with a dumbfounded look, feeling extremely depressed. The first thing the old ancestor did when he woke up was not to praise him for managing the family, but to roar at him instead. Who did he provoke? Looking at the dumbfounded descendants of the future generation, Xianyuan Wutian glared fiercely and then sighed with a face full of disappointment. Dinda's matter was an old matter, and the descendants of the Xianyuan family's current generation were not clear about it. After thinking about it for a moment, he felt that the aura that swept across the top of his head wasn't strong enough to make one's hair stand on end. It was basically completely within the range of Xianyuan Wutian's ability to kill. However, he didn't dare to underestimate it. let alone be careless. It seemed that he knew very well that the aura Dendi revealed might not last long. It might just be a greeting to him, and it was impossible for him to find out where the real body was hiding. Xianyuan Wutian threw the urn in his arms to the current generation of the family. Guard the Qinkuan earth for me, and do your best to adjust the violent aura that swept through the territory. I will go to the East Continent. Whoosh! As the words fell, the urn was thrown out, and Xianyuan Wutian had already stopped moving. And as he expected, almost as soon as he moved, the aura of Dendi that swept through the territory of Nan Ao disappeared without a trace. Everything returned to normal, as if it had never appeared. He didn't know whether this aura belonged to Qin Hao himself, or the successor of Dendi's inheritance. But he knew that Qin Hao, who died in the Nine Heavens God's punishment array, was abnormal. Only the remains were left, but no remnant soul was left. Maybe his soul had escaped. Now, whether it was Qin Hao himself or his successor, Xianyuan Wutian had to go to the East Continent. Xianyuan Wutian had to make a trip to the East Continent. He had already predicted that perhaps in the near future, Nan Ao would be in great trouble. He had to hurry up and find that old friend, the Sunset War God. Has the ancestor become crazy? The Emperor of Nan Ao trembled as he caught the urn. He was a little confused. The ancestor disappeared just like what his dead father and grandfather said. His methods were swift and decisive. Forget it. The ancestor had lived for more than 1,000 years, and his actions were unfathomable. He wasn't someone he could control. The only thing he could do now was to follow the ancestor's order and investigate the disappearance of the violent aura. And he glanced at the urn in his arms and the treasure that guarded the urn. It was the Qinkuan divine earth that could transform the body of a physical warrior into a soldier. Chapter 1184. Just as the three great forces of the southern region were moving, at this moment, Qin Hao on Coiling Dragon Peak had also reached the critical moment. As far as the eye could see, all the way to the foot of the mountain, the densely packed martial artists, as well as the people who stayed on the various visualization platforms and stone steps, were rolling around in pain. Their eyes were bloodshot, and they felt their heads ache. There were tens of thousands of ants gnawing on their heads. Their voices were hoarse, and their vocal cords were broken. They were living a life worse than death. The martial artists below the king's stage fainted on the spot from the pain. It could be considered a blessing. However, the martial artists above the king's stage had a certain level of cultivation. When Qin Hao's spirit net swept over, their spirit power spontaneously resisted. In the end, it was not as strong as Qin Hao's spirit power. However, they couldn't faint and were tortured to the extreme. In the end, a large number of people couldn't bear the taste of death and life. They raised their vitality and slapped themselves silly. Only then did they feel relieved. However, this was only a ripple of Qin Hao's spirit power. In fact, hundreds of millions of creatures were not deliberately targeted by Qin Hao. Right now, he was wholeheartedly focused on searching for the dragon eye hidden in the mountain peak. The ones who were most affected were undoubtedly the closest to Xianyuan, Chemical, and Ning Chao Fan, who were on the 5th platform, as well as the Coffin Bearer, the Broken Sword Elder, and the Coffin Bearer, who were meditating on the 6th stone step, the Sage, and the Old Demon. At first, everyone only saw a ball of strong golden light. Suddenly, it exploded on Qin Hao's body as he stepped onto the 6th platform. The golden light was too dazzling, and no one knew what was going on. Immediately after, a vortex of dark clouds appeared above their heads. Lightning flashed, thunder rumbled, and a strong wind howled, causing everyone to lose their balance. Ning Chao Fan, Xianyuan, Chemical, and the others suddenly left the ground and were about to fall. 1,000-feet-high mountain scared them so much that they couldn't help but grab onto the stones of the dragon-climbing peak. They were blown almost parallel, and they no longer had the time to see what was happening to Qin Hao. In the next second, a powerful spirit power spread out, as if it could pull the soul out of the body. It also made Ning Chao Fan and Xianyuan Chemical feel the same as the martial artists at the foot of the mountain. Their eyes were bloodshot as they fell into a wonderful state of hovering between life and death. The old demon, the coffin bearers, and even someone as strong as the old man with the broken sword vomited blood as their consciousness fell into chaos. At this moment, as Qin Hao strengthened his spirit level layer by layer, he was close to the strength of the Emperor level back then. He himself was also suffering from fatal damage. This time, it was not as simple as helping the old demon fight against Dugu Xianshao in the wasteland. At that time, Qin Hao's abilities were limited, and the amount of spiritual power he could unleash was also limited. However, right now, he had a fight with his life on the line. Only in this way could he compete with Spirit Emperor, who was also at the Emperor realm, and find the hiding place of the Dragon Eye from the array set up by the other party. At this moment, his red lotus fire soul, serene, purifying water soul, and dragon soul all came out. The divine grade, indestructible samsara art crazily revolved in his body, rapidly strengthening his body, especially when dragon scales covered his body and he activated the dragon form state. Qin Hao's endurance reached the highest point. Even so, the dragon scales were like leaves being cut by a wild knife under the ravaging of his spiritual power. Large pieces of dragon scales flew away from his body and shattered. Blood instantly stained his body. He's actually so strong. Li Wanji, who had witnessed everything, was shocked beyond words. As soon as he spoke, he felt a heavy, buzzing sound in his head. It was as if his ears were hit by a war drum. Immediately after, he opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of blood. Quan's footsteps were shaky. Emperor grade. When he raised his head, his eyes were filled with incomparable shock. He was injured in one blow. The spiritual power released by Qin Hao had obviously reached the Emperor grade. Moreover, it was the strongest 9-star Emperor grade among the Emperor grade. What a monster! Li Wanji said, suddenly enlightened. No wonder Qin Hao's comprehension speed was so fast, and his comprehension was so strong. He even broke through the boundary of the Spirit Emperor on the 4th platform. Because this guy's soul was at the strongest level among the Emperor grade. It was just that his body was too weak to use all of it. Could it be that he had obtained the inheritance of some peerless great emperor? Li Wanji couldn't figure it out, but he knew that Ning Chao Fan, who was known as a genius in array and inscription, was like a dog's fart. Dig? Another mouthful of blood was spat out. I was too close. This guy, I was almost torn apart by him. Li Wanji had no choice but to sit down. He stretched out both palms and patted the 2 temples on the side of his head. At that time, a dazzling platinum brilliance covered his whole body, forming a vast barrier. Qin Hao fully activated his powerful 9-star Emperor-grade soul. Of course, Li Wanji couldn't hide anymore unless he wanted to die. However, Qin Hao was already on the verge of death. To be precise, he was on the verge of collapse. His dragon scales continued to shatter. Blood flew out from his pores, and cracks appeared on his skin. As long as his spiritual power was increased by a little, what greeted him would inevitably be his physical body shattering. However, he still couldn't find out where the Eye of the Dragon was hidden on the mountain peak. Brother Qin Hao, what are you doing? Stop. Xiao Han was on the 6th platform and witnessed the whole process. Facing the raging spiritual power, she was swept by the wind. The jade pendant emitted a hazy halo. The halo wasn't strong, and it flashed again and again, appearing very weak. However, this power was completely different from the spiritual energy of the mortal world. It forcibly blocked Qin Hao's spiritual power and firmly protected her body, not letting her suffer the slightest injury. She didn't know what Li Wanji said to Qin Hao to make the other party fight so desperately. It was obvious that if this continued, only death would await Qin Hao. Qin Hao heard the call and endured the pain of flesh and blood being torn apart. He turned his head and smiled. He no longer had the strength to speak, but his eyes seemed to say, "Don't worry, it will be fine soon. Open for me." Turning around, Qin Hao let out another barbaric roar, causing the void to tremble as if it was about to collapse. Qin Hao once again squeezed out his soul force, releasing his spiritual power to carefully investigate the situation. In every corner of the mountain peak, he had already sensed it long ago. When his spiritual power swept out along the sky, 3 Emperor-level auras immediately flew over from the direction of the martial Ning Empire in the south. In addition, there were 6 more powerful Emperor-level auras coming from the Proud God Nation, getting closer and closer to the coiling Dragon Peak. These 6 auras were no stranger to Qin Hao. They were emitting Xuanyuan's aura. It was the aura of the bloodline of the Xianyuan family's old ancestor and Xianyuan Wutian. As Brother Dog had predicted, after Qin Hao released his soul magnetic field with all his strength, he indeed attracted Emperor-level powerhouses. Moreover, they were Qin Hao's mortal enemies. Of course, the most oppressive one was the one flying over from the north of the Proud God Nation. That one's cultivation was infinitely close to the 9-star Emperor level, and he was the most threatening one. In fact, no matter who it was, any one of the 10 emperors who rushed over could easily crush the current Qin Hao. After all, Qin Hao's external strength was just a wisp of his soul power in the past. With just his weak soul, how could he be comparable to Emperor Yuan, who was in his peak state? The urgent matter now was whether Qin Hao could find the location of the Dragon Eye and then quickly evacuate with everyone before the other party arrived. Otherwise, the consequences would be very serious. Chapter 1185. On the peak, the spiritual release continued, but Qin Hao's consciousness gradually blurred. Every time his spiritual power rose, his vitality would weaken a little. The two formed an extreme contrast. At the same time, a large amount of light foam began to fly out of his body and melt into heaven and earth. His figure looked more and more illusory. His original flesh and blood body looked more and more like an illusion. It could dissipate at any time. Qin hadn't know how long he could hold on. He could only force himself to hold on. Even if he died, he had to find the Dragon Eye and eliminate the pressure the coiling dragon formation exerted on Han and the old demon. Force! Big Brother Qin Hao, please stop. I beg you, please stop. I can't live without you. Xiao Han cried as she looked at the illusory figure in front of her. It was as if he would leave her in the next second. She cried. She shouted with all her might, summoning her strength to rush over. However, she was extremely weak and her vitality was severely depleted. She couldn't move at all. Li Wanji watched quietly. The platinum vitality turned into a cover and covered his entire body from the top of his head. He didn't move at all. Looks like he has reached his limit, sigh. With a soft sigh, his tone was filled with disappointment. Li Wanji's eyes wavered. Although he also wanted to activate the coiling dragon formation to lure out the hidden dragon. After all, he had been looking forward to the dragon's secret realm for 800 years. But the current situation was that if he didn't stop it, Qin Hao would die. The two of them had no enmity or hatred. Li Wanji couldn't let others die for his own selfish reasons. Moreover, Qin Hao no longer had the possibility of finding the Dragon Eye. It was simply too unjust to lose a life. Something's wrong. Suddenly, just as Li Wanji was about to make a move, something strange happened again. He discovered that Qin Hao, who was at the end of his rope, showed signs of strengthening his spiritual power again. At this time, a ball of blood energy that was born at an unknown time enveloped him. That ball of blood energy was extremely vast and filled with the might of a god or devil. Even Li Wanji, who was a 9-star Emperor stage powerhouse, couldn't help but feel fear in his heart. He had the urge to kneel down and worship it. In front of them, a blood bead hovered above Qin Hao's head, and a steady stream of godly and demonic energy flowed down from the blood bead onto Qin Hao's head, flowing into his body and nourishing him. Qin Hao's scattered body. Under the effect of the blood bead's power, Qin Hao's fuzzy consciousness suddenly sobered up, as if he was shivering, and his spirit was greatly shaken. It's the essence blood of a demon god. Qin Hao raised his head slightly. He was shocked, but his expression soon turned into one of joy. Just now, in a daze, the demon god blood essence sleeping in his heart had unexpectedly awakened. In that moment of crisis, it had protected Qin Hao's dissipating body. At this moment, the essence blood pouring down was spiritual qi. That's right, it was indeed spiritual energy, very pure spiritual energy. Moreover, this spirit qi had a very familiar smell, as if it belonged to him. Could it be? The fourth failed enlightenment, and the 12 streams of spiritual energy melted in the body? At this moment, Qin Hao figured it out. The demon god blood essence had swallowed the 12 streams of spiritual energy and then used the power of the spiritual energy to awaken it from its deep slumber. Even though he didn't know why it did this, he could feel the spiritual energy flowing through his meridians surging. Finally, it gathered in his dantian, forming a powerful divine fist that rushed toward Qin Hao. An 8th level Yuan Monarch's attack. Pa! An unprecedented feeling of comfort filled his body, and the blocked spiritual orifices were instantly cleared. Qin Hao had broken through to become a 9th level Yuan Monarch. As his cultivation level increased, his physical body became stronger as well. This affected the circulation of the indestructible samsara technique, and the power of his 3 souls increased by another level. At this moment, Qin Hao's cultivation level wasn't as simple as 3 plus 3 equals 6. Instead, it was 3 plus 3, which was better than 9. Naturally, the mental power that he couldn't release at full strength instantly had a lot of room for improvement. Ha ha ha, good timing. Show yourself. Taking advantage of the protection of the demon god blood essence, Qin Hao no longer had any scruples. He activated his red lotus flaming eyes and gathered his strongest attack. His mental power, which was at the peak of his previous life, blasted heavily into the mountain peak and completely penetrated it. Not to mention the hidden dragon eye, even the traces left behind by an ant that had died 10,000 years ago wouldn't be able to escape his eyes. Boom! At this moment, the mountain peak shook. However, when Qin Hao's mental power permeated the entire mountain peak, and he could even see the mysteries of all the array formations below, he discovered that there was no trace of an array formation at the top of the mountain peak. Was it an illusion? Qin Hao gritted his teeth and blasted another wave of mental power into the mountain. The result was the same. Regardless of whether it was outside or inside the mountain, there was no trace of an array formation. However, this second wave of mental power made Qin Hao realize that there was a small space tunnel hidden in the void around the mountain peak. There seemed to be another peach garden at the other end of the tunnel. However, Qin Hao wasn't interested in that. He was looking for the dragon eye. You dare to lie to me? Suddenly turning his head, Qin Hao widened his eyes and looked at Li Wanji angrily. At the same time, he retracted his mental power that permeated the mountain peak and condensed it in front of him. It whizzed towards Li Wanji. Stop! Don't be impulsive. I did lie to you. There is no dragon eye on the mountain peak, but not everything I said was a lie. However, the dragon eye that connects to the coiling dragon peak's array formation needs you to personally point it out. If you detect traces of a space tunnel inside the mountain peak, that is the best place for the dragon eye. Point it out. As long as you point it out, I can remove the coiling dragon array. I'll return your freedom. Li Wanji said anxiously. There was even a hint of pleading in his anxious tone. In the past 8 years, he had infiltrated the coiling dragon peak tens of thousands of times, but he couldn't find the exact location of the space tunnel. Qin Hao's arrival gave him a glimmer of hope. At first, he didn't believe that Qin Hao could do it. He just wanted to give it a try. In the end, he found out that Qin Hao's mental power was actually at the Emperor grade. Moreover, his mental power was even stronger than Li Wanji's. He could already vaguely feel that Qin Hao had found the location of the space tunnel. It was there. Big brother Qin Hao, go quickly. Don't trust this person anymore. He is a super powerful Emperor Yuan, and he has been lying to us all this time. Go! Xiao Han shouted at Qin Hao with all her might. Qin Hao focused on finding the dragon eye. He might not have seen the scene of Li Wanji releasing the platinum essence energy, but Xiao Han saw it clearly. This person's cultivation was even stronger than her father, Xiao Yi, more than dozens of times stronger. If even Li Wanji couldn't solve a problem, how could Qin Hao do it? On her, don't be afraid. I won't let him hurt any of you. Qin Hao hurried over and hugged the frightened and trembling Xiao Han into his arms. Then, he stared at her cautiously. Li Wanji, if this person insisted on not letting everyone leave, the old demon and the others wouldn't be able to escape. If this continued, the pressure of the coiling dragon array formation would be even stronger, and it would be even more difficult for them to escape. But it wasn't a wise move to fall out with Li Wanji at this time. What he wanted was just a tunnel to open up an alternate space. This tunnel was precisely what Qin Hao sensed just now. If you want to find a tunnel, you should have said so earlier. Is it fun to make up a superfluous lie? Qin Hao scolded Li Wanji with a drooping face, as if he was scolding an idiot. This person was actually Emperor Yuan. No wonder he wasn't suppressed by the restrictions of the coiling dragon peak. But who exactly was he? What was hidden at the other end of the tunnel? Did you really find it? Li Wanji felt that he had a chance. Chapter 1186. I can point out the location of the tunnel for you, but if you still dare to fool me, I will cripple you even if I have to die together with you. Qin Hao said solemnly. Okay, point out the location and I will let you go. Li Wanji nodded and promised. Naturally, he would not doubt Qin Hao's threat. The other party did have the ability to cripple him. In the next second, Qin Hao did not hesitate. His red lotus-fiery eyes burned brightly as they swept along the peak and fixed on the space above. He couldn't help but laugh in his heart. Li Wanji was painstakingly searching for the location of the tunnel. He had always thought that the tunnel was inside the mountain. Little did he know that the real hiding place of the tunnel was above the void. Golden Finger! With a deep shout, Qin Hao drew the primordial qi in his body, and the essence blood of the gods and demons constantly replenished his primordial qi. A dazzling light burst out from his fingertip. Qi! Li Wanji had a tacit understanding. His palms formed several seals, and his movements were like opening two doors. His arms stretched out to the sides. Whoosh! The primordial qi under his arm swept across, and the coiling dragon formation that enveloped the peak suddenly stopped. The suffocating pressure disappeared. Go! Qin Hao followed the direction in his memory and shot out his golden finger. A scorching line of fire was released from his fingertip, piercing through the sky and landing on the left side of the mountain 80 meters above the peak. Above, boom! The sound of thunder shook, and then there was a shattering sound. This finger, as if breaking through space, carried Qin Hao's extremely fierce mental attack, penetrated the void, and landed accurately. Inside the hidden tunnel, the scene suddenly changed. At the place where the golden finger pierced through, the primordial qi in the void went berserk, forming two twisted small vortexes. In the small vortexes, two balls of strong light reflected in the void. They shone out of the void like the eyes of a real dragon opening, vivid and lifelike. I did it. Qin Hao smiled slightly. His smile was extremely tired. His overloaded mind relaxed, and the spiritual net that covered the sky of the southern region quickly retracted into his body. His body was almost limp in Xiaohan. In his arms, he only felt dizzy. He really wanted to sleep for 10 days and 10 nights. Good move, ha ha ha. Li Wanji's mood was surging as he laughed wildly. After 800 years of bitter waiting, the coiling dragon temple stumped more than 10 generations of geniuses of the southern mountain range. He himself was also perplexed, but today he was forced to reveal his true form in the hands of a young martial artist he had never met before. It was truly astonishing. Not daring to waste even a second, Li Wanji stepped on the 6th platform and flew into the air, floating beside the two vortexes that had opened up the space tunnel. Then, he looked at the mountain beneath his feet. He frowned slightly. If he wanted to break the hidden dragon secret realm completely, he would have to activate the complete coiling dragon formation on the mountain. However, this void tunnel was 80 meters away from the mountain peak. It was really difficult. You think you can stump me? Rise! Li Wanji shouted in a domineering manner. He aimed at the mountain peak and slammed his palm down. The yuan chi in his palm was like a huge net falling down, firmly wrapping around the entire Panlong mountain. Then he raised his hand. Crack! The base of the Panlong mountain was smashed into pieces. It broke through the ground and rose into the air, carrying a large number of martial artists on the mountain. The scene was majestic and magnificent. When a mountain peak rose 80 meters and touched the two vortexes, Li Wanji chuckled. He aimed at the void and quickly drew something as if he was drawing something. Gradually, his yuan chi condensed in the void and emitted a dazzling light. In the light, a dragon head appeared and roared at the sky. It was very domineering. Looking down from the dragon head, the neck and a mountain peak became one. At this moment, the headless body of the dragon had a head. The vortex tunnel that Qin Hao had opened up with his golden finger was a pair of dragon eyes. The light in the tunnel reflected, making the dragon eyes look energetic. It was the first time the two of them worked together. Their skills were extraordinary and could be called a masterpiece. I drew the dragon, and you added the finishing touch. Kid, no matter who you are, you've shown your talent with me today. You'll definitely leave a good story in the Southern Mountain Range. To thank you, I'll give you a gift. You are a true stroke of good fortune. Li Wanji gave a strange smile as he looked at Qin Hao. Oh no! Qin Hao's heart trembled. He felt that something was wrong. At this moment, he couldn't care about anything else. He could only push Xiao Han to the side. Hunter, run. It's too late. Li Wanji waved his hand and poured his yuan chi into the mountain peak, fully activating the coiling dragon array. Roar! The dragon roared into the sky. It was as if the dragon on the mountain was injected with a soul. Li Wanji's yuan chi spread through the mountain peak. The dragon carved on the rock wall seemed to have flesh and blood. The meridians extended crazily. With a crash, the rocks fell off. With a bang, the martial artist below the mountain saw a dragon emerge from the rock wall. The dragon's body was hundreds of feet long. It floated in the sky and looked down on everything. It was extremely shocking. The legend is true. The legend is true. The dragon of the coiling dragon wonder is alive. The dragon is alive. Oh my God. Miracle. This is a miracle. Under the pressure of the dragon's majesty, tens of thousands of martial artists knelt down. Ning Chaofan and the others, who were standing on the fifth platform, were also dumbfounded. But the real shock came in the next second. Go for me. Li Wanji raised his arm and slashed at Qin Hao's position. Roar! The transformed dragon swooped down with rolling power. It roared fiercely and opened its ferocious mouth, biting down on Qin Hao's head. Brother Qin Hao. Xiao Han risked her life. Ignoring the depletion of her yuan chi, she swung the jade water sword with a clang. Like a sorrowful girl who had lost her lover, she stabbed at Li Wanji with all her might. Li Wanji wanted Qin Hao to die, so Xiao Han wanted Li Wanji to die with him. But the strange thing was that the dragon swooped down from the sky and did not cause any harm to Qin Hao. The moment it landed, it turned into a raging wave of spirit chi and disappeared again. It entered Qin Hao's head. I painstakingly drew it for more than 10 years with my supreme enchantment ability. The coiling dragon array absorbed all the spirit chi at the source of the South River. I even stole the draconic energy of the Ning, Xin Yuan, and Li families. I hid it in the mountains for 800 years. Today it's all yours, haha. Li Wanji laughed in his heart. He turned into a beam of light and quickly flew into the whirlpool tunnel. The power of his enchanted dragon spirit alone was enough to create a beginner emperor-level powerhouse. Of course, Qin Hao's benefits were not taken for free. The hidden dragon's secret realm needed the impact of the coiling dragon array to be completely opened. So before Li Wanji entered the tunnel, he had to invite Qin Hao in as well. So the tens of thousands of people on the ground were shocked to see Qin Hao standing on the sixth platform, crazily absorbing the dragon's spirit soaring in the sky. Then, with a shocking bang, the dragon spirit was lost. The coiling dragon mountain shattered and collapsed. Chapter 1187. Qin Hao was suddenly struck by the dragon spirit. He felt his brain swell, and his body and mind were exhausted. He could no longer hold on and fell into a coma. At this moment, he understood that Li Wanji had no evil intentions. Intent. Then, under the guidance of a force, his body followed Li Wanji and floated into the space tunnel. "We'll be inside. Big brother Qin Hao, wait for me." Xiao Han was slightly startled. Things had changed too quickly. Before he could stab Li Wanji, the other party had already activated the dragon spirit and entered Qin Hao's body. Inside his body, it was only in a flash. Seeing Qin Hao float into the void, Xiao Han squeezed out his remaining strength and nimbly stepped on the void. In a flash, he also disappeared. Damn it, damn it. The supreme fortune of the sixth platform of the coiling dragon wonder was indeed obtained by him. I'm so angry. The white-haired old man swallowed the dragon spirit of the formation. How hateful. Ning Xiaofan suddenly came back to his senses and suddenly saw the most spectacular scene in his life. The 100-feet-long dragon spirit returned to Qin Hao's body. Xianyuan Chemical's expression was extremely ugly. Even a fool could recognize that the power contained in the dragon spirit was unparalleled. Since it was obtained by Qin Hao, it was enough to make up for the gap between him on the fourth and fifth platforms. The gap between everyone. Even this kind of good fortune was enough to make Qin Hao far better than everyone else. There was no time for Ning Xiaofan and Xianyuan Chemical to be jealous. In the next second, the mountain collapsed and the airflow fell into a riot. Everyone was completely helpless. They were like straws, dancing and crying out. They were sucked into the vortex with a strange cry. Not only Ning Xiaofan and Xianyuan Chemical, but also the old demon, the coffin bearer, the broken sword old man, and even the dozens of martial artists who had ascended to the fifth platform were all sucked in. They were too close to each other. Hua! The dust settled, and dust covered the ground. Looking at the empty space in front of them, the tens of thousands of martial artists were all shocked. Disappeared. The entire mountain, along with the people who couldn't retreat in time, all disappeared. If it weren't for the massive crater in the ground that was nearly 100 miles wide, all the martial artists present would have suspected that they were dreaming. This dream was so bizarre and full of color. Just a moment ago, the sky was covered in dark clouds, lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled. The strong wind made it hard for people to open their eyes. Along with a burst of mind-splitting spiritual power, the mountain disappeared in the next second. The most famous coiling dragon wonder in the southern region had completely disappeared. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. High up in the sky, several platinum-colored flowing lights flew over from 3 different directions. Their enormous auras were like the descent of emperors. That ferocious yuan qi shook the ground to the point of bouncing nonstop. As soon as the emperor rank experts of the Xianyuan clan and Ning clan entered the arena, it caused the coiling dragon peak that had fallen into a short period of silence to erupt into waves once more. Without needing anyone to give the order, all the martial artists rushed into the void. The hovering platinum figure knelt down. The strong were born to dominate the weak. Unfortunately, we were one step too late. A middle-aged Emperor Yuan of the Xianyuan clan said. When they arrived, they had already seen several figures hiding in the void tunnel. Among them, there was an aura that clearly belonged to an emperor rank expert. Moreover, it was a particularly strong one among the emperor ranks. One of them. They guessed that it must be the initiator of the spiritual power shrouding the southern region. You, stand up and tell me what happened here just now. Where is the coiling dragon wonder? An Emperor Yuan of the Ning clan said majestically, pointing to the head of a kneeling martial artist at his feet. The 3 emperors of the Ning clan floated separately from the Emperor Yuan of the Xianyuan clan 100 meters apart, minding their own business. Because the Ningwu Empire was further away from the coiling dragon peak than the Proud God Empire, the difference of a few seconds made it so that the people of the Ning clan didn't see the scene of Qin Hao floating into the tunnel. Reporting to the Great Emperor, this is what happened. The kneeling martial artist got up, bowed, and briefly recounted what happened. In fact, among the tens of thousands of people present, No one knew that the violent spiritual power was released by Qin Hao. They only saw a ball of golden light suddenly erupting on the peak. It was too strong, and then a gust of wind suddenly blew and dark clouds covered the sky. Everyone was tortured to the point where they were better off dead. They want to see what happened on the peak. But the last scene was seen by everyone. The coiling dragon wonder was activated by a white-haired martial artist. Li Wanji pressed down with his palm and lifted the peak up. The dragon spirit transformed under Li Wanji's palm and was finally subdued by the white-haired martial artist. Then the peak collapsed, and the people on the peak disappeared together with it. What? Li Wanji did it again? Emperor Yuan of the Ning clan shuddered inexplicably after hearing this. Li Wanji's name was quite famous in the southern region. After all, it was hard for a freak who participated in 7 consecutive visualization sessions and still wasn't rejected by the crowd to not become famous. But Emperor Yuan of the Ning clan would never have thought that Li Wanji was an emperor-rank powerhouse. At this time, from the mouth of the kneeling martial artist, the surrounding martial artists nodded repeatedly. Emperor Yuan of the Ning clan had to believe it even if he didn't want to. Could it be that Li Wanji is the person who released the violent spiritual power? Another Emperor Yuan of the Ning clan looked at his 2 companions in confusion. Replying to the great emperor, according to the scene, the method that Li Wanji used to draw the dragon in the air is exactly the same as the legendary enchantment of the Spirit Emperor. He is most likely the Spirit Emperor himself. The martial artist said again, "Hiss." Not only did the 3 emperors of the Ning clan gasp, but even the 6 emperors of the Xianyuan clan gasped at the same time. Oh my god, it turns out that Li Wanji is the elusive Spirit Emperor Ling Yangzi. No wonder this person participated in 7 consecutive visualization sessions and wasn't rejected by the crowd. From this, it made sense. It all made sense now. At this moment, whether it was Emperor Yuan of the Ning clan or Emperor Yuan of the Xianyuan clan, they all agreed with the words of the kneeling martial artist. But why did the old ancestor order them to kill the owner of the violent spiritual power, which was to kill Li Wanji? The 6 emperors of the Xianyuan clan couldn't figure out how this Li Wanji offended their old ancestor, Xianyuan Wutian. Could it be that he hooked up with the old ancestor's lover? Were the 2 of them rivals in love? In terms of seniority, it was possible, because all the emperors present knew that the history of the coiling dragon wonder was at least 800 years old. Spirit Emperor had been famous for a long time. When he advanced to the emperor realm, all the emperors present were wearing open crotch pants. They were in their mother's wombs. In terms of age, Li Wanji and Xianyuan Wutian, who was more than 1,000 years old, seemed to be of the same generation. TSK. I didn't expect that the most grumpy old ancestor of the Xianyuan clan is also a sentimental person. He got angry for beauty. An old Emperor Yuan of the Xianyuan clan couldn't help but smile. Xianyuan Wutian woke up from his coffin because of jealousy. He really hated Li Wanji to the core. It seemed that they also had very deep stories when they were young. Ha ha ha. The other 5 emperors of the Xianyuan clan all laughed happily. It was a waste of youth if one wasn't romantic. No matter how powerful the old ancestor was, he was once a hot-blooded young man who was impulsive for love. However, even if he killed Li Wanji because of jealousy, this matter couldn't be spread. After all, it would damage the dignity of the Xianyuan clan. Thinking of this, the 6 emperors straightened their attitude, and their expressions became very serious. But they really couldn't help but want to laugh. Chapter 1188. Qian. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation people from Shiliang are here. What should we do next? Should we send people to search for traces or stay here? Among the 6 emperors, a middle-aged Emperor Yuan looked at the old Emperor Yuan. The old ancestor ordered Li Wanji to be killed, so this person couldn't be left alive. There's no need to stay. Li Wanji has already torn a space tunnel and left. His whereabouts are erratic, and it won't be easy to find him. Let's go back and discuss it with the family head. The old Emperor Yuan said. Judging from the strength of his violent spiritual power, Li Wanji was a 9-star Emperor-level cultivator. If they stayed behind, they wouldn't be his opponent unless everyone joined forces. The middle-aged Emperor Yuan nodded, and then smiled coldly at the 3 emperors of the Ning family. You guys are too late. I'm afraid you won't have a chance to win Li Wanji over to serve the Ning Wu Empire. Same here. Isn't the Xianyuan family unable to get him? The leader of the Ning family, Emperor Yuan, responded coldly, guessing that the other party's purpose was the same as theirs, to win over Li Wanji. Li Wanji had already left, and it was useless for them to stay. After exchanging glances, the 3 emperors of the Ning family tore space and teleported back. Now that Qin Hao's spiritual power was no longer interfering, the space of the southern territory returned to balance, and they no longer had to worry about being involved in the turbulence of space. They had to bring the news to great Emperor Ningwu. It turned out that Li Wanji was Ling Yangzi. As for whether they would continue to win him over, it would depend on the family head's plan. After the Ning family left, the 6 people of the Xianyuan family were also about to leave. But suddenly, the middle-aged Emperor Yuan's eyes flashed as he caught an acquaintance among the tens of thousands of martial artists. Qinglao, it's Duanmu Qingwei. The middle-aged Emperor Yuan suddenly became excited, and the excitement in his eyes turned into thick, killing intent. Duanmu Qingwei, the great elder of the left faction of the Myriad Cultivator Alliance, one of the supreme leaders of the Myriad Cultivator Alliance. Truly, there was a way to go, but you didn't take it, and there was no door to hell. Translation, 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 9th uncle. The middle-aged Emperor Yuan was anxious. Now was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Once Duanmu Qingwei returned to the Myriad Cultivator Alliance, it would be difficult to kill him again. The battle situation has changed. It's not suitable for us to take action at the moment. Let's go back and discuss how to deal with Li Wanji with the Patriarch. Let's go. The old Emperor Yuan didn't allow the middle-aged Emperor Yuan to resist. He waved his palm and opened up a space crack. The 6 of them hid in it and headed towards Nanao. A few days ago, more than a dozen scouts sent to probe the 10,000 Cultivator Alliance were killed one after another. None of them survived, which proved that the 10,000 Cultivator Alliance was ready for a head-on battle, which represented the other party's determination to fight to the death. On the surface, with Duanmu Qinghui's cultivation, any one of the 6 of them could kill him. But Emperor Yuan knew that it wasn't that easy. Duanmu Qingwei had led the Myriad Cultivator Alliance for decades, and he wasn't a mediocre person at all. He even suspected that even if all 6 of them attacked together, they might not be able to kill the first elder of the Myriad Cultivator Alliance, who was half a step away from Dendi. It was more important to bring the news that Li Wanji was Ling Yangzi back to the Patriarch Alliance. The old Emperor Yuan also sighed softly. The original plan to launch a surprise attack on the Myriad Cultivator Alliance was inexplicably disrupted. Now that the old ancestor had ordered Ling Yangzi to be killed, he was afraid that the attack on the Myriad Cultivator Alliance would be delayed again. Brother Qing, the people of the Xianyuan family seem to have noticed us just now. In the crowd, Master Gu whispered. Qing Lao nodded. Not only did they notice us, but they also had the intention to kill us. Qing Lao was also very puzzled. The relationship between the Myriad Cultivator Alliance and Nanao was very serious. They were even like fire and water. But it wasn't time to shed all pretense of cordiality yet. Why did the people of the Xianyuan family have such strong, killing intent towards him before leaving? At this time, Qing Lao didn't know that the border of the Myriad Cultivator Alliance had been attacked. He took a deep breath and looked at the vast crater, feeling a burst of regret. The magnificent coiling dragon wonder was gone just like that. The essence of the path of enchantment hadn't been fully comprehended yet. What a pity, what a pity. At this time, Qin Hao's handsome face suddenly appeared in his mind. According to the discussion of the cultivators just now, The person who finally absorbed the Wonder Dragon spirit was a white-haired young man. This made him recall that Qin Hao had 2 strands of white hair in front of his forehead when he met him in the Star Refining Building. Moreover, a while ago, Gu Huangshou did give Qin Hao some pointers and let him come to the Coiling Dragon Wonder to see the subtleties of the enchantment technique. Could it really be him? Qing Lao thought. Brother Qing, who are you talking about? Gu Huangshou looked at Duanmu Qing Wei, who was lost in thought. Nothing. Duanmu Qing Wei waved his hand and smiled faintly. Maybe he was thinking too much. Qin Hao was just an 8th-stage Yuan monarch. It was impossible for him to step on the 6th platform. Maybe it was another white-haired cultivator. Brother Qing, do you want to go back to the 10,000 cultivator union to take a look? I keep feeling that the people of the Xinyuan family are strange. Gu Huangshou reminded him. At that moment, the other party emitted a very strong murderous intent, as if he was eager to get rid of Duanmu Qing Wei. Maybe something had happened to the 10,000 cultivator union. There's no hurry. There's still half a month before the Martial Ning Empire's triennial auction begins. I'm preparing to make a trip there. Qing Lao replied. He was a little worried about the 10,000 cultivator union. However, he wasn't the only person in charge of the 10,000 cultivator union. Without him, the sky would collapse. The 10,000 cultivator union was divided into the left faction and the right faction. The left faction was led by Grand Elder Duanmu Qing Wei. They pursued the ideals of the former Zheng nation's imperial family and focused on recuperating and striving to govern. Moreover, the left faction still supported the Zheng family, which had withdrawn from the ruling stage, and hoped that the Zheng family could return to the throne. The right faction was different. The right faction opposed the left faction and was very opposed to the return of the Zheng nation. The Grand Elder leading the right faction was a very violent guy. He killed decisively and pursued fighting to stop fighting. Although his position was different from Duanmu Qinghui's, the two sides were united in protecting the 10,000 cultivator union. Even without Duanmu Qinghui, the right faction's Grand Elder could still command the entire situation. Qing Lao was very interested in the upcoming auction in the Martial Ning Empire. There was news that Western Liang's Dange had brought a miraculous pill to this auction. After a martial artist took it, they would instantly advance. It was very miraculous. Qing Lao studied alchemy to the point of obsession. He had to go and take a look. Oh, I understand. You want to bid for a Saint's Soul pill to decipher the recipe? Gu Huangshou smiled. He understood Duanmu Qinghui very well. Once the recipe for the Saint's Soul pill was deciphered, the strength of the 10,000 cultivator union's left faction martial artists would rise greatly in a short period of time. Gu Huangshou naturally didn't doubt Qing Lao's ability. As long as he could bid for it, he would definitely be able to decipher the recipe. This was because Qing Lao was the only powerhouse in the southern domain who had a chance of becoming Dendi. Let's go. Duanmu Qinghui smiled knowingly and didn't deny it. A spatial gap tore open in front of them, and the two stepped in. No matter what happened to the 10,000 cultivator union, as long as he could hold on until he returned from the Martial Ning Empire with the Saint Soul pill, the situation would be reversed. Moreover, Gu Huangshou was providing the divine soldier behind the scenes. There were also several great suzerain-level experts in the former homeland of the prosperous country who had a good relationship with Gu Huangshou. If Southern Ao really started a war with the 10,000 cultivator union, the Xinyuan family definitely wouldn't feel good about being counterattacked. Chapter 1189. Everyone left one after another, and the other martial artists who participated in this spectacle also dispersed. In the gradually thinning crowd, the emperor of the proud north, Li Yuan, who was wearing a simple green robe, looked up at the sky and smiled. Ning family, proud south, proud Xinyuan family, even Duanmu Qingqing of the Wanshou Alliance. Qingqing is also here. The violent aura caused quite a commotion. However, many powerhouses had come in high spirits, but they returned in disappointment. Duanmu Qinghui probably doesn't know that the Wanshou Alliance was attacked by Proud South, Li Yuan said. Fight to your heart's content. No matter what the final result is, the side that benefits will always be the proud North. Li Yuan wasn't worried about the proud Northly family. However, there was one thing that he couldn't figure out. According to the martial artist present, the person who released the violent aura was obviously Li Yuanji. And this Li Yuanji was actually the most mysterious spirit emperor in the southern region. No wonder the old ancestor warned him to treat him with respect and not anger him. Otherwise, even the old ancestor couldn't protect Li Yuan. Ling Yangzi was proficient in refining and enchanting. When he fought seriously, Li Yuan was indeed not his opponent. This person was worth the proud North trying to rope in at all costs. But the strange thing was, when did the Xinyuan family have a grudge with Li Yuanji? This made Li Yuan very confused. If the two sides really had a grudge, why didn't Spirit Emperor take action before? For hundreds of years, he had been hiding his head and tail, but today he rose up. It's not that he doesn't want revenge, but the time isn't right. The old ancestor's words are really profound. Li Yuan put his hands behind his back and said resentfully, perhaps Ling Yangzi had been cultivating some kind of heavenly god technique for the past hundreds of years. Until today, he had achieved great success in this technique, which was enough to deal a devastating blow to the Xinyuan family. Nodding, Li Yuan felt that it was probably the case. He was the emperor. How could the emperor guess wrong? Forget it. Let's go back and talk to the old ancestor. Li Yuan also prepared to leave. Even if his cultivation was infinitely close to a 9-star great emperor, Li Yuanji tore space and ran away. He couldn't lock his aura, because no one knew where Li Yuanji ran to. Li Yuan was about to leave. Suddenly, in the dense forest not far from the coiling dragon wonder, he found a very familiar aura. This aura made Li Yuan's expression turn ugly. He turned around. With a flash, Zhang Xian appeared right before the other party. At this moment, in the dense forest not far away, two figures stood, one in front and one behind. Through the dense forest, they observed the direction of the coiling dragon wonder, the collapse of the mountain, and Qin, how absorbing the dragon spirit. He had seen everything that had happened. The figure at the front was Li Yaqi. Behind Li Yaqi was Shi Xiang, who looked like a dog. Wong. The space in front of the two of them twisted. Suddenly, a majestic and imposing figure descended without any warning, giving Li Yaqi and Shi Xiang a fright. This was especially true for Li Yaqi. Looking at Li Yuan in front of him, he was so shocked that his face turned pale and his body trembled. He was completely at a loss for words. Valspawn, you don't even know how to speak after seeing your father? Li Yuan's face tightened as he shouted in a very serious manner. Father, Imperial Father. Li Yaqi was intimidated by Li Yuan's imposing manner. He knelt on the ground and kowtowed. Subordinate Shi Xiang, the new confidant of the 7th Prince, pays respect to my lord. Long live the Emperor. Where did this shitty subordinate come from? I don't have anyone with the surname Shi under my command. Get lost. Li Yuan suddenly shouted, and a turbulent air burst out from his mouth. With a bang, the air burst out and hit Shi Xiang's body. Shi Xiang felt that all the bones in his body were about to shatter. He suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood and rolled like a tortoise shell. He howled as he somersaulted and disappeared into the forest. You? Li Yaqi's eyes were burning with anger. Shi Xiang had already stated his identity. He was his subordinate, but Li Yuan did not show any mercy. You don't like it? Vile spawn. Li Yuan looked down at his son with disdain. Son, count as one. I don't dare. Li Yaqi quickly lowered his head, not daring to let Li Yuan see the anger in his eyes. He placed his hands on the ground, and his 10 fingers sank deep into the soil. The soil in his hands was Li Yuan. Hee, I'm afraid there's nothing in this world that you don't dare to do. Li Yuan sneered. How could he not feel Li Yaqi's suppressed anger? However, he did not care at all and pointed at Li Yaqi's head again. He reprimanded loudly. My northernly family is the indomitable lord of the southern region. What was that thing just now? A weak king stage martial artist like an ant is worthy of serving my Li family's descendant? Vile spawn, have you fallen to such a state? You make me bitterly disappointed. Fallen? Li Yaqi smiled bleakly in his heart and did not respond. Taking in a king's stage martial artist as a servant was considered falling? Well, even if he fell, he was forced by the Li family. Since young, Li Yaqi had never received the slightest bit of warmth from the family. The family had never taught or nurtured him. He had never experienced what it meant to be protected. In the past, when his eldest brother was alive, it was still okay. Although they were not brothers, his eldest brother was benevolent and loving. He had never looked at him with a lowly gaze. His eldest brother had passed away inexplicably. Li Yaqi's days in the family felt like years. It was fine if the other brothers bullied and oppressed him, but even his younger brother and sister treated him differently. His subordinates, the black-white double demons, were the wandering heroes that his mother had saved. What did the family give him? Did they give him anything? I know you hate the Li family, but you can't deny that the blood flowing in your body is the blood of the Li family. Even if you die, you can't get rid of the Li family. Forget it. I'm too lazy to talk nonsense with you. Get up and go back to the family to help your second brother train soldiers. Why don't you learn more from your second brother? He has stepped into the Emperor stage and cultivated the yellow art of expansion to the 8th stage, the profound transformation realm. You trash. Li Yuan cursed and turned to leave in disappointment. However, he felt that Li Yaqi still had no intention of getting up and leaving with him. Li Yuan couldn't help but stop in his tracks. He turned back and said hoarsely, Valspawn, you're born with a lowly aura. You don't have any courage or backbone. Boom. Li Yaqi felt like his head was about to explode. He endured being bullied. He endured being discriminated against by his brothers and sisters. Scolding him, insulting him, it was fine. However, he could not insult his mother, the pitiful woman who had brought him into this world. Li Yaqi suddenly raised his head. His eyes were bloodshot. He suddenly pulled out his pale white fingers that had sunk into the mud. An intense scarlet light was born between his palms. His suppression turned into the most ferocious attack, charging at his biological father. He heavily punched this dazzling scarlet light. Pa! Li Yuan gently raised his right arm and flicked his finger at the scarlet light flying over. Li Yaqi's furious attack was easily neutralized. This simple action did not require any strength at all. It was as simple as lifting one's foot to stomp on an ant. It shattered Li Yaqi's last shred of dignity. Second stage, Chi Shadow Rising Fog. Is that all your yellow art of expansion can do? TSK trash. Li Yuan spat out a mouthful of saliva. Suddenly, he raised one of his palms and turned his fingers into claws. His chi stirred up a hurricane and gathered a clump of platinum aura. Then, he sent a sharp palm strike into the distance. Rumble! This platinum aura flattened a towering mountain peak in the distance, leaving behind a bottomless crater. This shocking scene was no less than the collapse of Coiling Dragon Peak. This is the true Chi Shadow Rising Fog. However, yours is not worthy of being called Chi Shadow Rising Fog. Oomph. Li Yuan said emotionlessly. The ground beneath his feet trembled and the cracks spread. When he reached the void, his figure flashed and disappeared completely. Chapter 1190. Li Yaqi's birth mother had been a maid in the palace back then. She had a lowly status and had died in the scheme of the concubines. However, Li Yuan had never looked down on Li Yaqi. It was just that Li Yaqi couldn't walk out of the pit in his heart. He didn't teach him or give him any rights. It wasn't because he was disappointed in Li Yaqi. Li Yuan just wanted to see if this disappointing son of his was really his. Kind. Fight if you have the ability. Fight if you don't want to. Go and trample on your second brother and beat up your fourth brother for insulting you. This was what Li Yuan desperately wanted to see. However, Li Yaqi didn't. He was like a useless lamb in front of the dragons of the royal family. He trembled, felt inferior, abandoned himself, and felt uneasy all day long. This vile creature is really infuriating. However, that Chi Shadow Soaring Mist move is still pretty decent. It can easily kill a 5th level Yuan Venerate. Li Yuan couldn't help but chide him as he flew in the void. He hadn't paid attention to his seventh son for a long time. It turned out that he had already entered the Venerate grade and reached the second level Yuan Venerate. He hoped that he could understand his father's intentions. Li Yuan sighed sorrowfully. How could a royal family be as harmonious as a commoner's family? While he was still around, he could suppress the descendants of the royal family who were getting stronger day by day. His seventh son should also quickly become stronger. Otherwise, once his lifespan was exhausted, how could he escape from the claws of his brothers when his seventh brother's birth mother was of such a despicable background and he did not have any power behind him? There is only one emperor. Li Yuan knew very well that an emperor wouldn't leave a threat by his side. He had also walked this path. His hands had been stained with the blood of his brothers, and he had done many things that he had no choice but to do. However, this was a royal family. Did they want to be emperors? Did they want to be emperors' stepping stones and sacrificial lambs? Li Yaqi stared at the towering mountain range that had disappeared in the distance. The ground was still shaking from the impact of Li Yuan's attack. Li Yaqi stood rooted to the ground in shock. His body was trembling and his eyes were filled with fear. Is it really only the second level of the yellow Dianart, Chi Shadow, Soaring Mist? It could be said to be devastating. Under the bombardment of the golden-white aura, even an 8th-stage Yuan Emperor would be crippled if he didn't die. Li Yaqi knew very well how terrifying the yellow art of heaven expansion was. Although Li Yuan's realm had reached the peak of martial arts, the way he used his moves and his posture at that moment was too ruthless. The strike that was mixed with the majesty of an emperor made it impossible for people to resist. Defiance. At this moment, Li Yaqi was truly frightened. However, an even stronger sense of humiliation surged to his head, causing him to roar. Oh my God! Is this the move of Emperor Yuan? Too scary, too scary. Seventh Prince, Your Highness, what should I do next? Li Yaqi roared. Shi Xiang, whose face was bruised and swollen from the fall, crawled back and prostrated himself on the ground. Trash! Li Yaqi kicked Shi Xiang, causing him to spit out another mouthful of blood. Li Yaqi took 2 deep breaths and suppressed the fear that Li Yuan brought. He looked into the sky and said, Just you wait. Sooner or later, I will make everyone in the Li clan regret this. I will make them understand. But look down on me. What a tragic end it will be. And you, Li Yuan, just you wait. I will kill you with Chi Shadow and Fog. I swear, I will kill you with Chi Shadow and Fog. Shi Xiang trembled as he listened to the rebellious words. He regretted following Li Yaqi. The royal family was too cold-blooded. Accompanying the emperor was like accompanying a tiger. As long as he took a wrong step, he would be consigned to eternal damnation. However, he knew that if he dared to withdraw now, Li Yaqi would definitely kill him without hesitation. Just like Li Yuan, it would be as easy as blowing off dust. Go and find me a few swordsman masters. Soul Essence swordsmen with cultivation above the 3rd and 5th tier of the Monarch realm. From today onwards, I want to practice swordsmanship. Li Yaqi said coldly and walked away. He walked into the distance. Swordsman masters? Shi Xiang was stunned. He pointed at the disappearing, coiling dragon peak and asked, What about the white-haired man and the Nanming coffin bearer? The coffin bearer is dead for sure. No need to wait for him. Li Yaqi turned around and glanced at the coiling dragon peak. Recalling the scene of Qin Hao absorbing the dragon spirit, he had a strong feeling that the Nanming coffin bearer was dead for sure. However, even if he died, he would release the energy of the yellow art on Qin Hao. Therefore, no matter what, Qin Hao would not be able to escape from his grasp. He was not in a hurry to take revenge. I also think that the coffin bearer is dead for sure. But why does the 7th Highness want to practice swordsmanship? Shi Xiang exhaled and followed. 2 months ago, Qin Hao had killed Shi Kuanglong, who was half a step away from the Emperor realm, before his potential was stimulated by the coiling dragon peak. Now that he had absorbed the dragon spirit, the coffin bearer was most likely dead. What Shi Xiang did not understand was why Li Yaqi did not practice the Li family's ancestral imperial arts and insisted on finding a swordsmanship master. If I tell you to look for it, then go and look for it. Remember, a talkative slave dies quickly. Li Yaqi glared fiercely at Shi Xiang, causing Shi Xiang to shiver in fear. Why find a swordsmanship master? Because Li Yaqi wanted to let Qin Hao know what it felt like to say, "You are not qualified to make me use my sword. Let's see if you improve faster or if I improve faster." Qin Hao, I said that I will be your nightmare for the rest of your life. Ha ha. Li Yaqi laughed and flew into the sky. With the support of the yellow art of expansion, he believed that the power of his sword energy would not be inferior to Qin Hao's. It was a pity that the coiling dragon wonder would be destroyed. If he had known that it would be destroyed, he would have stepped on it together and accepted the last round of stimulation. At the very least, Li Yaqi's power would not be inferior to that of Ning Chaofan and Xianyuan Chemical. After all, he was a direct descendant of the Li family. As for Ning Chaofan and Xianyuan Chemical, they were lowly branches. The wind blew the leaves, making rustling sounds. There seemed to be small insects crawling around under him, giving him a strange feeling. His body was weak and his mouth was dry. The hot weather made him even more uncomfortable. Thirsty, water, Qin Hao, who had fainted on the ground, let out a few sleep-talking sounds. Hearing his voice, a sweet spring immediately descended. It was very cool and very sweet. It slid down his throat and into his stomach. Qin Hao began to greedily suck it. Woof, woof, woof. The dog spirit licked Qin Hao's cheeks. Its tongue carried the power of a strange flame, making it slightly hot. Hana! Qin Haoji suddenly woke up from his coma and sat up abruptly. Hua! A huge leaf fell from his face onto his leg. The spring water on the leaf spilled all over his body and wet Qin Hao's pants. Woof woof roar. Seeing that Qin Hao had woken up, the dog spirit happily jumped around him a few times. Brother dog. Qin Hao rubbed his eyes. He did not know how long he had been unconscious. His head was very heavy. When he woke up, he looked around. Chapter 1191. Before he lost consciousness, his last impression was that Li Wanji had brought him into the space whirlpool. Could this be the inside of a different space? With a glance, Qin Hao had a conclusion. It was indeed a space secret realm. The place where he was lying was at the top of a low hill. The surrounding environment and terrain of the hill were very similar to the geology of Panlong Mountain. However, there are also differences. The wind here was not very natural. The speed of its flow was very constant. Looking up at the sun was not very real. It was like a projection that was refracted through a secret method. As an Emperor stage expert in his previous life, Qin Hao could naturally see that this was an independent space sealed by a profound method. However, the terrain and plants in the space were all real, just like the underground world of the Imperial Mausoleum in the eastern suburbs of Luoshui Imperial City. If I'm not wrong, this place used to be part of the source of the South River a long time ago. However, it was forcefully shattered by an Emperor stage expert and sealed. Qin Hao exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. Knowing where he was, he calmed down. The entrance to the space was above the top of Panlong Mountain, which was where the whirlpool tunnel was. The person who sealed it was extremely powerful and was definitely not weaker than his previous life. Even the degree of exquisiteness of the technique was above Qin Hao's. Could it be Li Wanji? Qin Hao shook his head. If it was Li Wanji, how could he not know the entrance to the secret realm? In that case, who was the one who placed the seal? What was the purpose? Or could it be that there was a shocking secret or a supreme treasure hidden in this space? The treasure was to the extent that even Li Wanji would go crazy for it. Since we're here, let's take things as they come. Let's find Han and the old demon first. The secret realm aroused Qin Hao's curiosity. He patted his head. He was still a little dizzy. Han and the old demon were not by his side. They should have been scattered by the spatial airflow and fell somewhere in the secret realm. He hoped that everyone would be safe during this period of time. Brother dog, how long have I been unconscious? Qin Hao took out a herb that nourished divine sense from his storage ring. He plucked the green leaves of the herb, and threw them into his mouth. As the juice entered his stomach, it flowed through his meridians and merged with his origin chi. His mind felt refreshed, and he became much more clear-headed. Woof, 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 woof. The dog spirit squatted in front of Qin Hao and barked 7 times. 7 days. Qin Hao was stunned for a moment before bursting into laughter. You actually slept for so long. Thank you for your hard work. He raised his hand and stroked the dog spirit's head. For the past 7 days, it had been silently protecting him. He looked at the leaves on his legs. The leaves were as wide as a palm and thick, with downy hairs and pits in the middle. It should be Brother Dog that brought it here to quench its thirst. It really was like an older brother. If it weren't for Brother Dog, Qin Hao would have been lying unconscious on the hill. Perhaps he would have been eaten by a wild beast. Moreover, the number of martial artists involved in the mystic realm was probably not small. Ning Chao Fan, Xinyuan Chemical, you'd better behave yourselves, or else. Qin Hao's eyes flashed with sharpness as he subconsciously clenched his fists. The two of them had stimulated their potential on Coiling Dragon Peak and obtained great benefits. He had obtained quite a bit of good fortune and was now qualified to cause trouble for Ke Ah and Ah Huan. However, this wasn't what Qin Hao was most worried about. What really made him nervous was the coffin-carrying man and the old man with the broken sword. The coffin-carrying man and the old man with the broken sword were undoubtedly the top existences in this year's wonder. Qin Hao had been unconscious for 7 days. If Han Ke and the old demon, who had been separated from him, met the two of them, the consequences would be dire. The consequences would be very serious. Thinking of this, Qin Hao immediately sat cross-legged and meditated. He checked his own condition. After receiving the spiritual energy infusion, awakening the god-fiend blood essence, and devouring the dragon spirit, did his cultivation change? As for how strong he was, he could only perfectly unleash his strength when he understood his own condition and fought with the coffin-carrying man and the old man with the broken sword. His divine sense entered his body. At this moment, he could clearly see that the god-fiend blood essence was still in an awakened state. It floated in his heart and emitted a dark red glow. Qin Hao couldn't help but be overjoyed. The power of the blood essence was unfathomable. As long as it remained awake, there were 10,000 ways to increase his strength. Moreover, the godfiend blood essence was wrapped in a milky white halo. The milky white halo was also filled with powerful energy. It was undoubtedly the 12 spiritual energy infusion. Qin Hao couldn't help but be excited again. He was excited because he had really benefited a lot from it. Although the amount of spiritual energy infusion was much less than before the godfiend blood essence was awakened, if he completely absorbed it, it would still give Qin Hao a qualitative leap. The coiling dragon wonder was worth the trip. However, what made Qin Hao even more excited was still behind. When his divine sense swept across his dantian, he saw an exquisite dragon spirit quietly entrenched in his dantian. Its tiny body looked very cute. However, the aura it emitted was incomparably powerful. Emperor's stage. Boom! Qin Hao's mind shook. He couldn't help but want to jump up and roar in excitement. After his rebirth, there was not a moment when he didn't want to recover his former peak cultivation so that he could find that bitch Han Lingxian. Settle the score. No matter how hard he worked, his improvement was several times, or even more than 10 times that of his peers. However, one couldn't become fat in one bite. How difficult was it to recover to the Emperor's stage? As his level increased, he would break through. The more difficult it was different now. Qin Hao actually had an Emperor's stage dragon spirit in his body. How could he not be ecstatic? He was so crazy that he was about to go crazy. If I refine the dragon spirit and merge it with me, I can recover to Dindi in a short period of time. Qin Hao clenched his fists, and his coiled-up body trembled. He was really too excited. Too excited. Although the power of the dragon spirit was only at the level of the early stage Emperor Yuan. However, even the lowest stage Emperor Yuan could sweep across the world. At this moment, Qin Hao only wanted to thank Li Wanji's 18 generations of ancestors. Once he broke through to the Emperor stage, he could completely control the highest profound meaning of alchemy. He didn't need to be too weak. Instead, he would be restricted in all kinds of ways. With Qin Hao's ability, with sufficient medicinal herbs, it would take less than 5 years to cultivate from the early stage Emperor Yuan to the peak Emperor Yuan. Refine the dragon's spirit. Hot-headed, Qin Hao almost impulsively wanted to refine it immediately. But when he made his move, his movement stiffened and he fell into hesitation. Because a set of mysterious mystical abilities passed down from ancient times was recalled by him, without warning, and broke into Qin Hao's sea of consciousness. Transcendence, mystical ability. Qin Hao chanted silently, and the condensed essence energy scattered in his meridians. The grade of the transcendence mystical ability was the same as the golden finger and the crepe myrtle heavenly rainbow sword technique. It was also a high-grade heaven-tier martial technique. But Qin Hao knew very well that its true power was far superior to the golden finger and the crepe myrtle heavenly rainbow sword technique. The transcendence mystical ability had been passed down since ancient times. In ancient times, it was a set of powerful martial techniques that shocked thousands of powerhouses and gave people a headache. In modern times, except for Qin Hao and Zhang Wu, no one else knew how to cultivate the transcendence mystical ability. And Zhang Wu didn't have the conditions to cultivate it at all. Firstly, the transcendence mystical ability had long been lost. Qin Hao and Zhang Wu knew how to cultivate it. It was taught by an old Yuan emperor back then. That old Yuan emperor could be considered the master of Qin Hao and Zhang Wu. They treated him with respect and love, as if he was their biological father. Secondly, special conditions were needed to cultivate the transcendence mystical ability. Originally, it was impossible for Qin Hao to cultivate it successfully. However, the appearance of the dragon spirit in his body at this moment gave him hope. The innate condition for cultivating the transcendence mystical ability and condensing the transcendence mystical ability was to have a powerful spiritual object born between heaven and earth. The dragon spirit had the qualifications to become a transcendence mystical ability. Chapter 1192. Everyone absorbed together, stepping into the Emperor's stage isn't something that can be done overnight. I'm afraid I'll have to spend a lot of effort and time in seclusion to fuse with the Dragon Soul. As a result, I might miss the opportunity to enter the South Pole Divine Palace, and I might not be able to find Little Han and the old demon. After thinking for a moment, Qin Hao suppressed his impulse and gave up the idea of fusing with the Dragon Soul. The value of fusing with it was far less than refining it into a Dharma idol. Moreover, there was the remaining power of the God-Fiend blood essence and the 12 strands of spiritual energy in his body. Absorbing the spiritual energy alone could help him advance to the Emperor's stage. It would be a waste to forcefully consume the Dragon Soul at this time. Cultivate into a Dharma idol. Nodding, Qin Hao no longer hesitated and began to cultivate according to the cultivation method of the Dharma idol technique. All the memories of his previous life and this life in his mind turned into overlapping waves that bombarded the dragon soul. The Dharma idol technique was actually similar to a martial artist's cloning technique. However, its power was thousands of times stronger than cloning. No matter how brilliant the cloning technique was, it couldn't unleash the full cultivation of the martial artist's main body. At the perfection realm, one could at most use about 60 to 70% of the main body strength. This was already the highest realm of martial arts. Only extremely talented geniuses had this kind of ability. Moreover, during a battle, the cloning technique would be affected by external factors and severely weaken its combat strength, causing it to be difficult to use some of the powerful cultivation methods and martial arts techniques that the martial artist cultivated. A Dharma idol was completely different. Not only could it unleash the full cultivation of a martial artist, it could even surpass the ability of the martial artist's main body. More importantly, it was completely unaffected by external factors. As long as it was something that the martial artist's main body knew, it could perfectly replicate it, be it cultivation methods martial arts techniques, or even the origin spirit. For example, if Qin Hao cultivated a Dharma idol, the Dharma idol was equivalent to Qin Hao's second life, because it also had spiritual consciousness, the ability to think, and everything about Qin Hao, including the power of three souls, the demigod body, and the indestructible samsara art. It could be said to be extremely abnormal. Although it was separated from the main body, it was connected to the main body and was under the main body's command. No matter how difficult and dangerous it would never betray him. Could it be that Qin Hao would betray him? Thinking about it from another perspective, if a second Qin Hao suddenly appeared in the middle of a battle with the same strength, speed, swordsmanship, and source spirit as Qin Hao, then how miserable and desperate would the opponent be? Therefore, the aspect divine power was publicly recognized as the most perverse cultivation method since ancient times. Very few martial artists could cultivate it. The innate conditions to cultivate it were too harsh. One had to rely on luck. Who would have thought that the great fortuitous encounter that stumped the ancient warriors would appear on Qin Hao today? Only a fool would give it up. Qin Hao sat cross-legged, his body releasing balls of light one after another, extremely dazzling, causing the entire hill to shake. He poured all of his battle techniques, experience, life experiences, and even his attainments in alchemy into the dragon spirit's body. The entire process was extremely exhausting, and in a short moment, Qin Hao was already sweating profusely from exhaustion. The dog spirit quietly squatted where it was, guarding Qin Hao firmly to prevent anyone from disturbing him. For 3 days and 2 nights, Qin Hao carefully carved the dragon spirit with his powerful mind, as if he was carving a piece of art. He was so meticulous and rigorous, afraid that he would miss out on a single bit of his ability. Also at noon on the 4th day, whoosh, a wisp of white gas was exhaled from Qin Hao's mouth, and the flickering light on his body finally dissipated. He opened his eyes, which were filled with surprise. Even if he was exhausted, it could not stop his excitement at this moment. Aspect open. Qin Hao let out a deep shout, his eyes glinting with sharpness. Whoosh! A white shadow suddenly flew out of his body and stood in front of him, its speed so fast that it could not be seen in the blink of an eye. Then, in the next second, the dog spirit widened its eyes and barked at the white figure in terror. At this moment, the white shadow revealed a clear outline. It was a human, with 2 strands of white hair floating in front of his forehead. His face, temperament, expression, and even his height and body shape were exactly the same as Qin Hao. Brother Dog could no longer tell which one was real and which one was fake. It was too scary. Oh no, it was too scary. Success. Qin Hao was overjoyed. He stood up, and the tiredness on his face was swept away by his excitement. Qin Hao, who was opposite him, nodded at him, and the corners of his mouth unconsciously rose into a smirk. His smirk was very proud, because the thoughts of Aspect and Qin Hao were the same. However, in the next second, before Qin Hao could be satisfied, there was a bang sound, and the Aspect exploded, turning into a tiny wisp of dragon spirit smoke, and went back into Qin Hao's body. Woof! The dog spirit was stunned, as if to say, "What's going on? What just happened? Is it a new cultivation method? Did it fail?" The dog spirit hadn't seen the power of Aspect, and it disappeared. It's my first time condensing Aspect, so I'm not very familiar with it. Sorry. Qin Hao touched his head and laughed. The dissipation of Aspect didn't affect him at all. Although it had everything that Qin Hao had, in terms of soul, the two were not the same. The soul of Aspect was the dragon spirit. This was the essential difference between it and Qin Hao, and it might also be the only weakness of Aspect, because the soul of the dragon spirit wasn't as strong as Qin Hao's. Of course, it would slowly grow and become stronger bit by bit. However, even now, no one below the Emperor level dared to underestimate this aspect. After all, the dragon spirit was at the early stage Yuan the Arch. It seems that in the future, I need to keep tempering. Qin Hao's divine sense swept across his dantian, and the dragon spirit was entrenched inside again. Aspect techniques were the same as other martial arts techniques. They were also divided into small success, large success, perfection, pinnacle, extreme, and even after the extreme realm, there was still the ultimate realm. The more proficient one was in using it, the longer it could stay in the outside world. Once it was cultivated to the extreme realm, it could roam freely in the vast world. It was equivalent to a second Qin Hao wandering the world. Of course, as long as Qin Hao was willing, he could summon it back to his side with a thought. Even without tearing space, Qin Hao's body could reach the position of aspect in an instant. This was the power of the primordial magic power. And aspect techniques were the most perverted consummate skills among the many ancient magical techniques. Why did that ball of intense light suddenly disappear? Isn't my treasure going to be ruined? Suddenly, a strange voice came from below the hill. Qin Hao couldn't help but look down. It wasn't Ning Chao Fan or Xinyuan Chemical. Qin Hao didn't know these two figures at all. They should be the martial artists on the fifth platform who were innocently swept into the mystic realm by the vortex. When Qin Hao looked at them, the two of them happened to look up and meet Qin Hao's gaze. One of them couldn't help but be overjoyed. It seems that the treasure is not ruined. This time we're going to be rich. What they saw was the white-haired martial artist who had absorbed the dragon spirit. Almost instantly, they understood that the intense light they saw from afar must be Qin Hao refining the dragon spirit. Since they were here, it wouldn't be Qin Hao's turn to refine the dragon spirit. In fact, the two of them had already spoken recklessly. Standing below the hill, they arrogantly pointed at Qin Hao's nose and said, "Hey, white-haired brother, where's your dragon spirit? Why did you take it back when you saw us coming? Why don't you let it out and let everyone absorb it?" Chapter 1193. Yes. As the saying goes, those who see it have a share. Don't you think it's too much and a waste to swallow the dragon spirit of coiling Dragon Mountain alone? Release it for us brothers to absorb it together. You don't have any objections, right? The other person sneered. His tone was unfriendly as he slowly walked towards the hill. He looked at Qin Hao as if he was looking at an ant. Qin Hao's aura was that of a 9-star monarch. How could he be compared to them? A casual move from them was enough to teach Qin Hao a lesson. They could kill him however they wanted. In fact, even if Qin Hao resisted, he would only be adding a corpse to the pile. As for the dog spirit beside Qin Hao, he was completely ignored by the two martialists. Early first-level Yuan Venerate. Late first-level Yuan Venerate. Qin Hao scanned the two of them with his consciousness and was speechless. They were simply trash. Who had given them such an indomitable spirit? Who had given them the courage to clamor at him? You seem to be very helpless. Why? Are you very unconvinced? At that moment, the two martialists had already walked up to Qin Hao. One of them even pushed Qin Hao's chest contemptuously. His chest. Yes, I do feel very helpless. Qin Hao spread his arms and sighed. These two idiots didn't even have the desire to let him use his Dharma projection. Killing them with his Dharma projection was an insult. It was an insult to his own abilities. Cut the crap. Hurry up and release the dragon spirit so that I can absorb it. Also, while I'm not angry, you better get lost as far as you can. The other person glared at Qin Hao fiercely. If he didn't do as he was told, he would kill him with his sword. You want to seize my dragon spirit? Qin Hao is slightly stunned. Isn't it obvious? Hurry up, we are in a hurry. One of the martialists was extremely impatient. They had been very confused and terrified at first after being inexplicably sucked into this space. They had been fleeing for a long time, but they couldn't find the exit at all. Later, they weren't afraid anymore. Instead, they were ecstatic. This space was filled with many strange treasures. In the past few days, they had found many king-level medicinal herbs and some ores. Once they left, they would be rich. They didn't know how long this space would last. In short, they just wanted to collect as many treasures as possible before they left. It was precisely the commotion caused by Qin Hao refining the dragon spirit that had attracted them here. They believed that a supreme treasure had appeared here. However, this was not the case in the end. However, Qin Hao's value was far greater than that of a precious treasure. Why aren't you releasing your dragon spirit? Do you want to see blood? Whoosh! Seeing Qin Hao dilly-dallying, a martial artist decisively drew his sword. Wait, I'll release. Seeing this, Qin Hao quickly nodded in agreement. At the same time, he activated his transcendence mystique. Don't you want the dragon spirit? I'll give it to you. Whoosh! A white shadow flew out of Qin Hao's body. The dragon spirit rushed out of Qin Hao's dantian and pounced towards a martial artist. It really is a dragon spirit. Why did it become so small? My little baby, come quickly, ah! The martial artist's eyes lit up, and he was extremely surprised. He couldn't help but reach out his hands. The dragon spirit came into his arms. Although the dragon spirit had become small, its aura was still extremely powerful. Just as the martial artist reached out his hands, a strange change occurred. The dragon spirit shook out a light, shook its body, and turned into Qin Hao's appearance. 2 strands of white hair fluttered, and a finger pierced towards the martial artist's forehead. Even the tone, when releasing the move, was exactly the same as Qin Hao's. Golden finger. Whoosh! This finger came quickly and suddenly. The scene of the dragon spirit turning into Qin Hao had already shocked the martial artist silly. How could he care about fighting back? Seeing this finger, it was about to sink into his forehead. Pong! Suddenly, when the Dharma idol was getting closer and closer to the martial artist, and the finger was about to sink into his forehead, it exploded and turned back into a tiny dragon that flew back into Qin Hao's body. Qin Hao was stunned. The first time the Dharma idol attacked, it was too disappointing. Before it succeeded, the time limit was up. Although the kill failed, at this moment, the martial artist on the other side was so shocked that his eyes widened. His feces and urine came out, and his feet were wet with urine. He was just a hair away from dying. The Dharma idol's finger that was about to enter his head carried with it an aura of death that crazily devoured the martial artist's mind, leaving him with an indelible shadow. He was so scared that he couldn't speak. What the hell was that? Oh my God! What the hell was that thing just now? After frantically gasping for breath 3 times, the martial artist came back to his senses and looked at his companion with fear in his eyes. You dare to trick us? Brat, you're courting death. His companion shouted angrily, his face full of shame for being deceived. The long sword in his hand rolled up the revered level aura, and he did not hesitate to attack Qin Hao's head. As the sword fell, the running pace became faster and faster. Sigh, it seems that I have to do it myself. Complaining to the Dharma idol in his heart, Qin Hao's fingertip condensed a dazzling light. Boom! At this moment, a scorching hot breath spewed up to Qin Hao's side, and the flames spread over the 2 martial artists. Clang! The running martial artist's long sword fell to the ground, and his footsteps came to a stop. His charred body was gently swept by the breeze and scattered into black, flying ashes, which were mercilessly blown away. His companion behind him was the same, leaving behind a pool of sorrowful urine, and disappeared without a trace. Only a sparkling spatial ring in the bushes told the world about it. There was once a martial artist standing here. Burp! The dog spirit let out a burp, and with a roll of his tongue, he sucked back the flames that were raging between his teeth. Then, he anxiously pushed a big leaf on the ground to Qin Hao's feet. All right, you win. Qin Hao dispersed the light at his fingertip. Brother Dog's actions were quite fast, and he walked forward, kept the 2 space rings, and turned around with a smile. Woof woof, roar. The dog spirit unhappily smashed the big leaf on the ground twice with his paws, as if urging it. This is? Qin Hao only noticed the big leaf on the ground now. It was originally used to hold water, and after he woke up, he did not pay much attention to it. Now that he looked at it carefully, he felt that it was very eye-catching. Ripe. It's the leaf of the beast spirit tree. Qin Hao finally remembered, and could not help but exclaim in shock. Roar, awoo-woo. The dog spirit raised his head and let out a series of long howls, as if saying, Damn you, I finally remember. Ha ha, sorry brother dog, where did you find it? Let's go and pick the beast spirit fruit. Qin Hao patted the dog spirit's head apologetically. The beast spirit fruit was very beneficial to Brother Dog. However, in order to protect him, he found the beast spirit tree, but did not have time to eat the beast spirit fruit, and hurriedly came back with the spring water. Now, from the growth of the leaf, the beast spirit fruit was already ripe, and it was definitely not young. He could only hope that no one had taken it yet. Roar, roar, woof. The dog spirit lifted his paw and pointed to the southeast of the hill, indicating that he found it there. It was not far, only about 7 to 8 miles away. Haha, easy, wait there, I'll get it for you. Only 7 to 8 miles. Qin Hao did not care about it at all. He circulated the yuan qi in his body, flapped his huge wings that emitted scorching hot flames, and stepped on the ground, ready to fly. Looking at Qin Hao in the air, the dog spirit raised his head, and his eyes were full of sympathy. Bang! Following which, Qin Hao, who was less than 10 meters in the air, screamed in panic and fell heavily, his head stuck in the soil. Chapter 1194. The spiritual beast fruit, as the name suggested, was a strange fruit eaten by magical beasts. It had no grade, and the older it was, the more power it contained. Although it had no grade, its unripe green fruit was comparable to an 8th grade medicinal herb. When the fruit was ripe, it would be more powerful. However, it was useless for martial artists to eat it. Because of its uniqueness, it was very rare in the mainland. Even in the undeveloped primitive forest in the western Liang Medicine Valley, it was very difficult to find a spiritual beast fruit. Brother Dog's luck was really good to find one in the secret realm. Why didn't you tell me that I can't fly in this space? Rubbing the sore bridge of his nose, Qin Hao was in so much pain that tears were about to flow out. He glanced at the high leg beside him, valiant and spirited. The big dog was as proud as the master of the Medicine Valley. The dog still had an indifferent expression. In fact, the dog spirit thought that Qin Hao had noticed that there was a strange seal in the space. After all, when Qin Hao was awake, he spent a lot of time feeling the composition of the space elements. However, who knew that he used the time to understand his own situation? Therefore, he neglected the restriction in the sky. Sigh, what a cold-blooded dog. It hurts my heart. Qin Hao continued to rub his nose. In his previous life and this life, he had never been so humiliated like just now. In a sober state, he plunged his head into the soil. If outsiders saw this, wouldn't they laugh their teeth off? He was the famous Dendi. Okay? Fortunately, Hunter didn't see it, and neither did the old demon. If the old demon saw it, he would definitely laugh at Qin Hao for half a year. At this moment, he suddenly thought of Guadi. He remembered that Guadi was best at poking the ground with his head, so he must be very experienced. After walking for nearly 2 hours, Qin Hao and the dog spirit finally arrived at the place where the spiritual beast tree grew. It was very big, very thick, very tall, and had luxuriant leaves. It stood beside a stream. The water was very clear, and one could see the bottom at a glance. It made people have the urge to lean over and drink. It was not clear how long this spiritual beast tree had lived. It towered more than 100 feet tall, majestic, like a strong warrior guarding this land. It grew because it was close to a water source. It was so good. Moreover, the basin-sized golden fruit hung on the tree like the sun. It was so dazzling that it blinded everyone's eyes. There were a total of 10 fruits like this. Qin Hao knew very well that the spirit beast fruit's initial state was only the size of a walnut. Since the spirit beast tree in front of him was so huge, it must be at least a few hundred years old. To be honest, Qin Hao couldn't help but drool. If there were any other magical beast present, they would probably go crazy with excitement. However, when the dog spirit arrived, it was only stunned for a moment before it leaped up without hesitation. It bit off a large leaf and filled it with water from the nearby stream before returning to Qin Hao's side. It was clear that Qin Hao must be very thirsty. He had consumed a lot of spiritual energy and held on for so long. He was already exhausted. Even in his dreams, he was thirsty. One could imagine how thirsty he was. Good brother dog. Qin Hao crouched down and hugged the dog spirit's neck. Woof, woof, roar. The dog spirit struggled and rolled its eyes as if saying, "Don't give me that. I'm not interested in a man's embrace." Wow, my God. What the hell is that thing on the tree? Why is it so big? The fragrance it emits is so strong. Its grade must not be low. It must be at least grade 8. We're rich. We're rich this time. Haha. Just as Qin Hao and the dog spirit were talking, suddenly there was a surprised laughter. A group of cultivators were laughing crazily from afar. They opened their arms and ran towards the towering tree. They were so excited that it was as if they had seen a peerless beauty. Someone's coming. Qin Hao immediately stood up. Roar, woof, 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 woof. The dog spirit let out a series of anxious barks. Its paws kept kicking up the soil as if to say, "It's all your fault. Why did you hug me? Someone else beat you to it. Don't worry, the 10 spirit beast fruits on the tree are all yours. Not a single one can escape." Qin Hao's face darkened, and he also walked toward the opposite side. "Hey friends, I found these fruits first. But you guys are hugging the tree so tightly like a beauty, it doesn't seem very good." In front, there were 5 people. 2 of them were holding hands, excitedly running around in circles. The other 3 were hugging the tree together, their 3 faces rubbing against the bark as if they were burying their heads in the chest of a beauty, intoxicated and unable to control themselves. Forbidden. Oh, hearing Qin Hao's voice, the 2 cultivators who were holding hands and jumping around in circles were stunned for a moment, and then quickly let go of their hands, lest they be misunderstood as gay. Immediately after, the 5 of them, their eyes fell on Qin Hao at the same time. "Friend, isn't it inappropriate for you to say that? We obviously saw it first. How can you lie? Your lying level is so lazy. You can't even fool a child." The 5 cultivators sneered together, lined up side by side, and turned into a human wall to block Qin Hao, preventing him from getting close to the spirit beast tree. Moreover, the 5 of them actively operated their pneuma, ready to strike at any time. To be honest, just 4 days ago, my dog found this tree, but because of my injury, I couldn't pick the fruits. Until today, my injury has recovered, so I can pick the fruits while I'm at it. Let's go. Please do me a favor and don't make things difficult for me. If you quit, I'll pay you a generous compensation fee as compensation." Qin Hao argued. Everything he said was the truth. The spirit beast tree was indeed found by Brother Dog first, but even if it wasn't, the first one to arrive, just now, was Qin Hao. Ha ha ha. The 5 cultivators all laughed. "Who are you kidding? Little brother, your joke isn't funny at all. Don't you just want to share the fruits with us? Why are you being so secretive? Hypocrite. To tell you the truth, we won't give up a single one of these 10 fruits. Get lost if you know what's good for you. Otherwise, swords have no eyes." A ferocious-looking, burly man carrying a broad axe, the fierce-looking cultivator, threatened Qin Hao. Qin Hao's brows furrowed. It seemed that it was impossible to reason with them. "Everyone, I understand your feelings. How about this? Let's not talk about who found it first. What is this tree? What are the effects of the fruits? Do you know?" Qin Hao said, still wanting to give them one more chance. Even if the 5 of them obtained the spirit beast fruit, it would be useless to eat it. It might even cause discomfort and damage their meridians. "Oh, what are the effects of the fruits? Why don't you tell us? If it's reasonable, I can consider making things easier for you." Among the 5 cultivators, a blue-clothed cultivator with the strongest aura seemed to be the temporary leader. He said with a smile, ignoring the others' anxiousness. He secretly gave a look to a skinny guy beside him. Immediately, the skinny, sharp-mouthed cultivator took out an old, ancient book from his space ring and flipped it open. He pointed his finger at the table of contents and was ready to check. It wasn't hard to guess that the skinny cultivator was an alchemist and knew some herbs. "Thank you." Qin Hao cupped his hands. Finally, there was someone reasonable. He pointed to the tree behind them and said sincerely, "This tree is the spirit beast tree. The fruit it produces is called the spirit beast fruit. It is only effective for magical beasts. Because of the different body structures, human cultivators can't refine it. Moreover, the spirit beast fruit can backfire and damage the meridians and organs. Chapter 1195. Brother Monkey, the blue-robed martial artist muttered. In. The skinny man nodded. His finger quickly searched through the catalog. After flipping through more than 10 pages, he finally found the record of the spirit beast fruit. He was overjoyed. The further back the name of the herb was, the more precious it was. But after reading the introduction, his joy turned into helplessness. What Qin Hao said was exactly the same as in the ancient book. The skinny man raised his head and looked at Qin Hao with a surprised expression. Brother, that's a brilliant idea. His ancient book was an accidental treasure hunt. The amount of information recorded on the herbs was shocking. There were even records of herbs that had disappeared from the mainland for a long time. He could not remember. Qin Hao could easily identify the use of the spirit beast fruit. It could be seen that his knowledge of herbs was strong. This sigh, the skinny man's brilliant idea, made everyone understand that Qin Hao was not lying. The big golden fruit on the tree was a supplement for magical beasts. It was useless for humans. They were disappointed and heartbroken. They decided to give up the fight. But the leader of the blue-robed martial artists was not as dejected as the others. He was very calm. His eyes fell on the dog spirit behind Qin Hao. His eyebrows furrowed, and he suddenly understood. Qin Hao needed the spirit beast fruit to feed the dog. The blue-robed martial artist despised him. Feeding the dog was too wasteful. However, since it was useful to Qin Hao, it had value. The blue-clothed cultivator's lips curled up as he said generously to Qin Hao, "You are very lucky. We managed to obtain the fruits on the tree. We can give it to you. But the spirit beast fruit is not ordinary. Moreover, there are 10 of them. What treasures are you prepared to exchange with us to make up for our losses?" Hee. When the others heard, their eyes lit up. They gave the blue-robed martial artist a thumbs up. Boss was reliable. 50,000 earth crystals. Qin Hao stretched out 5 fingers. But before he could finish, he was coldly interrupted by the tall and fierce martial artist. "Brat, are you trying to dismiss a beggar? What about yours? Are you looking down on us?" In his opinion, 50,000 earth crystals was indeed a lot, but their team had 5 people. On average, each person would only get 10,000 earth crystals, which was too little. Listen carefully. What I mean is 50,000 earth crystals per person. Since there are 5 of you, I can give you 25 as compensation, Qin Hao said coldly. He was getting impatient. No one had ever dared to do this before. He interrupted himself. 10,000? The ferocious warrior was shocked, exchanging glances with the others. At this moment, they were all tempted. If it weren't for the fact that the blue-clothed martial artist hadn't spoken yet, they would have agreed without hesitation. After all, the beast spirit fruit was of no use to them. Too little. The martial practitioner in blue narrowed his eyes and let out a light snort. He spread out his hands and stretched out 10 fingers. 100,000. We'll take 100,000 earth crystals each. No. Hiss. The other 4 sighed. 250,000 was not a small sum. Boss had doubled the profit with a simple sentence. It was a bit like extortion, but they liked it. Sure. Qin Hao nodded and agreed without hesitation. For Brother Dog, he was not stingy at all. The blue-clothed martial artist couldn't help but be taken aback. It was a bit out of his expectations. He thought that both sides would at least bargain for a while. Qin Hao didn't even frown. He was so generous. Boss, I'm afraid this kid is a super invincible fat sheep, the kind that is overflowing with wealth. Why don't we? The ferocious warrior secretly made a killing gesture, meaning that he would pretend to agree to Qin Hao and give him 10 fruits. They would kill him when he wasn't prepared. All of Qin Hao's belongings were his. All the treasures belonged to the 5 of them. Slap! The blue-clothed martial artist slapped the ferocious warrior's face and shouted angrily, "Shameless, short-sighted. Is that all you have? Once we take the bee spirit fruit out, we'll put on display." At the Ningwu Empire's upcoming auction, many Emperor Stage Almighties will not hesitate to spend a lot of money to fight for their mounts. How much money will that be? Boss is brilliant. Haha, boss, I was wrong. The ferocious warrior was about to explode after being slapped, but in the next moment his anger turned into a mischievous grin, and he quickly apologized to the blue-clothed martial artist. At the same time, he looked at Qin Hao with even more vicious eyes. Qin Hao frowned. Friend, what do you mean? Who the hell is your friend? What I mean is very simple. Give me your spatial ring, and your wealth will belong to me. Of course, the bee spirit fruits on the tree will also be ours. Also, the blue-clothed martial artist, licked his lips and looked at Qin Hao with greedy eyes. Also, release your dragon spirit and cripple your own cultivation. Get ready to come with us to see Xianyuan Chemical. The blue-clothed martial artist laughed wildly. From the beginning, he felt that Qin Hao's hairstyle was very familiar. Only now did he remember. Wasn't it the white-haired old man who had absorbed the coiling dragon peak's array dragon spirit? Moreover, the conflict between the white-haired old man and Xianyuan Chemical had already spread at the foot of the mountain before the coiling dragon wonder opened. Both sides had an irreconcilable hatred for killing his brother. Once Qin Hao was handed over to Xianyuan Chemical, it would be a great merit and there would be many benefits. Snatching Qin Hao's spatial ring, plucking the fruits on the tree and auctioning them off, and finally handing over Qin Hao to his enemy was killing 3 birds with 1 stone. The blue-clothed martial artist's scheming was extremely sinister. Boom! The other 4 martial artists were shocked. They all looked at Qin Hao and sized him up carefully. Only then did they realize that Qin Hao was the white-haired martial artist who had absorbed the dragon spirit. Ha ha ha! We've struck it rich this time. We've struck it rich. The fierce-looking martial artist laughed heartily. Buzz, buzz, buzz. For balls of yuan qi erupted without holding back. All of them had reached the venerate level. The skinny martial artist was the weakest, a 3rd-level yuan venerate. The fierce-looking martial artist was a 5th-level yuan venerate. The other 2 were 4th-level yuan venerates. Of course, the strongest was their leader, the blue-clothed martial artist, whose cultivation base had reached the 8th level. In comparison, Qin Hao, who was only a 9th-level yuan venerate, was undoubtedly a sheep facing a tiger or a leopard. So you've been toying with me from the start. You never intended to make a fair deal. Qin Hao gritted his teeth and clenched his fists. He had given them a chance repeatedly and hadn't wanted to cause trouble. However, they had taken advantage of him and taken advantage of him. Their ambitions had swelled and they couldn't be satisfied. So what if I've been toying with you? You can only blame yourself for being stupid. If I were you, I would have hidden and absorbed the dragon spirit long ago. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been unable to protect myself with my current cultivation base. Yes, TSK. Trash. The blue-clothed martial artist spat and waved his hand. Go. Remember, don't kill him. We still have to bring him to Xianyuan Chemical and let him slowly torture him. Let him be tortured to death. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. 4 balls of venerate aura shot toward Qin Hao violently. Brother dog, kill him. Qin Hao's feet shook the ground as his yuan qi surged. He leaped high, scuttled over the heads of the 4 martial artists, and went straight for the strongest youth in blue. Qin Hao would personally kill him. This vicious and sinister scum would be slain by his palm. Roar. The dog spirit also moved. Although it was only a 4th-level venerate beast, it had been infected by the red lotus fire for many years, causing it to mutate and possess the ability to use flames. Furthermore, it had obtained the beast emperor's inheritance. Even though the dog spirit hadn't been completely refined, it had still absorbed 10% of the beast emperor's power and was far superior to the 4 ordinary human martial artists. Chapter 1196. Qin Hao went past the 4 of them, but they didn't give chase. They were very confident in the strength of the youth in blue. Qin Hao's fate would be even worse if he rushed over. However, It would be too shameful to let 4 human yuan venerates join forces to deal with a dog. No one is allowed to come over. Watch me smash its head, roast it, and eat it, the fierce martialist shouted. He wanted to fight the dog spirit one-on-one as he swung the axe on his shoulder. Roar! Brother Dog didn't panic in the face of danger. It lowered its head, and the axe light swept across its head. Its tail extended forward and turned into a python that coiled around the fierce martialist's right arm. Under the other party's shocked expression, he was flung 100 meters away and crashed heavily into a huge tree, breaking it. The fierce martialist who had fallen to the ground spat out a mouthful of blood. What astonishing explosive power! This dog is not simple. Let's work together to destroy it. The skinny man shouted. Alchemists were more sensitive, and this attack was enough to show the ferocity of a 5th-level yuan venerate. The martialist was simply no match for the dog spirit. In fact, the fierce martialist spoke at the same time. He endured the pain of his ruptured organs and shouted, What are you standing there for? Come and help me. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The 3 of them attacked immediately. 2 of the 4th-level yuan venerates unsheathed their swords and sent huge sword lights at Brother Dog. The skinny martialist was rather quick-witted as he circled behind Brother Dog and launched a sneak attack. Boom! Brother Dog raised its head and spat out a breath at the 2 sword lights. The sword lights disintegrated in the flames, and the breath melted the swords of the 2 martialists. What? How can this be? The 2 of them hurriedly retreated and looked at the bare sword hilts in their hands in horror. The swords in their hands were peak Monarch weapons that they had comprehended on the 5th platform. They were mediocre because they couldn't comprehend venerate weapons. However, they shouldn't have been melted by a breath of the big dog. The big dog's flames were too fierce. How could Brother Dog miss the opportunity to attack? It leaped up like a ferocious tiger and slapped one of the martialist's heads with its sharp paw. The martialist's head was crushed under its claws. The 4th-level yuan venerate couldn't even withstand a single blow. The remaining 4th-level yuan venerate immediately turned pale and wet himself in fright. Qin Hao wasn't worried at all when he heard the sounds of an intense battle behind him. Given Brother Dog's capabilities, he wouldn't be defeated even by a level 7 yuan venerate after activating his mysterious flame dog body. Those 4 yuan venerates were simply no match for him. Pay the price for your greed. As he approached, Qin Hao punched out at the blue-robed youth. Circulating the indestructible samsara art, his fist burst out with a golden light. The other party was a level 8 yuan venerate whose cultivation was about to surpass his by 1 heavenly cycle. Although Qin Hao had broken through to the 9-star Monarch stage, he still didn't dare to be careless. He released a divine tier cultivation technique and the power of the dragon soul at the same time. Even if the youth in blue was a level 9 yuan venerate, he would still lose a layer of skin even if he didn't die. But to Qin Hao's surprise, the blue-clothed youth did not treat him with caution. Instead, he clenched his right hand into a fist and simply punched back at Qin Hao. Pung! After the heavy collision, Qin Hao felt a huge force coming from his hand. His body was sent flying, and his fist was aching faintly. The blue-clothed youth didn't have it easy either. He groaned and blood seeped out of the corner of his mouth. He stumbled back 7 or 8 steps in a very sorry state. Clearly, he had severely underestimated Qin Hao's strength. Yuan Soul Realm Martialist. Yuan Soul Realm Martialist. The 2 of them exclaimed at the same time. This blue-clothed youth actually possessed a Yuan Soul Realm, so his strength was much stronger than an ordinary Yuan venerate's. I see. It's no wonder that a mere level 9 Yuan Monarch like you can step onto the Divine Soldier platform of Coiling Dragon Peak. You do have some qualifications. However, you can only tremble at my feet. The blue-clothed youth wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and spread his arms angrily. Yuan Soul, open for me. Wong. A wisp of green smoke appeared behind him. Within the smoke, a towering tree grew out of the ground. The blue-clothed martialist Yuan Soul was a tree soul, which belonged to the wood element. Whoosh! Qin Hao swung his hand, and the great void sword exuded a sharp, killing intent. Since the other party was in Yuan Soul Realm martialist, he deserved to be taken seriously. It's your honor to die under my Yuan Soul Realm. 5 Vine absolute kill. The blue-clothed youth shouted. 5 thick tree branches extended from his back and turned into steel whip-like vines. They coiled around Qin Hao's legs, arms, and neck in an attempt to tear apart Qin Hao's body. Fleeting sword. Qin Hao stepped forward and flicked his wrist. 5 streaks of fleeting sword chi shot toward the vines in the blink of an eye and collided with each other. However, the 5 streaks of sword chi didn't cut the vines in half. Instead, the sword chi shattered and the vines coiled around him. What a sturdy Yuan soul! Qin Hao immediately retreated and used his great void sword to block the whip-like vines. The quality of your sword is quite good. You should have comprehended it at the Divine Soldier platform, right? However, it will soon belong to me, the blue-clothed youth said in surprise. Qin Hao had a lot of treasures on him, so he couldn't help but refine them. Yuan Qi poured into the Yuan Soul Realm behind him again, and the 5 waving vines became even fiercer and fiercer. Is that so? Let's try this move again. Red Lotus Exploding Flame Blade. Qin Hao changed from holding the sword in one hand to holding it with both hands. Gritting his teeth, he activated the power of another Yuan Soul Realm and poured the Red Lotus Tyrannical Fire into the sword. He turned around and slashed at the 5 vines in the distance. Boom! A 20-foot-long flame slash that emitted a burning aura like magma came down from the sky. This time, the 5 vines were chopped into pieces and burned to ashes. Moreover, the Red Lotus fire followed along the broken vines crazily spread toward the towering tree. Ah! The blue-clothed youth screamed loudly and quickly cut off the 5 vines. For the first time, panic appeared in his eyes. The fire origin spirit naturally restrained the wood origin spirit. It seemed that the white-haired old man did not only have one origin spirit, but also 2 origin spirits. Damn it! 1,000 vines wreaking havoc. The blue-clothed martial artist did not dare to hold back anymore. His palms formed several seals, and the Yuan Qi in his body turned into a raging river and rushed into the origin spirit giant tree. The giant tree suddenly rose and rose several feet. Its majesty was not inferior to the 100-foot spirit beast tree. It was very spectacular. At the same time, thousands of vines danced in the air. In the next second, they scrambled to wrap around Qin Hao. This was the full strength of the blue-clothed youth. Ah, no matter how many come, the result will be the same. Qin Hao waved his hand, and the great void sword disappeared. Then he raised his palms above his head, and the Red Lotus fire chi in his palms became even more turbulent. A dragon's roar sounded, and the dragon's power increased to 40%. Fierce dragon scales appeared on Qin Hao's face. His voice shook the sky as he shouted, "Flame Dragon Revolving Sky Slash." The earth trembled under Qin Hao's terrifying Yuan Qi. The 100-foot-tall spirit beast tree let out a rustling sound. The river beside it suddenly became turbulent, creating waves that were several meters high. Flowers. When the thousands of vines rolled over, Qin Hao had already gathered a dazzling giant fireball above his head. The fireball was fiercely pushed into the air by him. Roar! The dragon's might filled the sky. The blue-clothed martial artist was shocked to see the fireball explode in the air. A 100-foot-long fire dragon flew out from the fireball. The dragon's body was covered in raging flames, and it crashed into his origin spirit giant tree. No! The blue-clothed youth despaired. The power of the fire dragon was enough to kill him. He did not hesitate and turned to run. He was too lazy to even take back his origin spirit. How could Qin Hao let him do as he wished? He controlled the fire dragon, and it flew over the origin spirit giant tree and exploded on the body of the blue-clothed youth. Bang! A mushroom cloud rose up. Chapter 1197. along with the blue-clothed youth's pitiful cry. The 100-foot-tall source spirit tree exploded with a pung sound and disappeared between heaven and earth. But the blue-clothed youth did not die. His body was in tatters as he lay in a black hole. Both his arms were broken and his face was filled with pain. Soul essence cultivators are much stronger than normal cultivators. Even after being hit by the Jade Sky Slash, he didn't die. Qin Hao walked over and stepped on the back of the blue-clothed youth. "Brother, let's talk nicely. Didn't you want the spirit beast fruit? Now it's all yours." The blue-clothed youth quickly begged for mercy. "Pung!" Qin Hao punched him in the face. "The spirit beast fruit originally belonged to me." "Ah!" The blue-clothed youth spat out a bunch of broken teeth, and his nose was smashed. Yes, the fruit belongs to you, and the tree also belongs to you. You can dig up the tree and plant it again to grow more fruits." That's a good idea." Qin Hao's eyes lit up as he looked at the spirit beast tree. It was thick and strong, over 100 feet tall, but his interspatial ring could hold it. "Since I came up with this idea, please spare my life. Moreover, I belong to you. Big brother, accept me as your little brother. The secret realm is very dangerous. Not only are there other cultivators, there are also strange things. I can help Big Brother deal with Xinyuan chemical. Of course, even with my arms broken, I can still control the ancient tree source spirit. Its might, Big Brother has already seen it. With a genius like me as your little brother, you will only profit. Moreover, I think Xinyuan chemical is extremely shameless. Daring to be Big Brother's enemy is the biggest mistake he has made in his life. I have decided to use the ancient tree source spirit to tear him apart and let him taste a life worse than death." "Taste!" The blue-clothed youth roared in an incomparably noble manner, his face solemn. "Pucci!" Qin Hao's finger pierced through his skull. The red lotus fire eroded his body and annihilated his soul. "Why?" the blue-clothed youth finally said with an unwilling look in his eyes. "Because you are not worthy," Qin Hao indifferently replied, pulling out his bloody finger. Help him deal with Xinyuan chemical? Perhaps when the time came, he would help Xinyuan chemical deal with Qin Hao. Qin Hao had experienced the word shameless from the blue-clothed young man just now. He would not make the same mistake again. More importantly, compared with Guadi, who was a proud and upright genius, the guy in blue was so lowly that he didn't deserve to be an underling. He didn't even deserve to carry Qin Hao's shoes. As the red lotus fire descended, the blue-robed young man was also reduced to ashes, and his divine soul was destroyed. At this moment, Brother Dog's battle had also come to an end. As the first enemy's head was smashed like a watermelon, the martial artist, who was so scared that he wet his pants, couldn't withstand the second move. Brother Dog used the big dog gouges out the heart, killing him on the spot. The skinny martial artist behind Brother Dog screamed in fright. Before he could do anything, his comrades had all died. Then he saw the strongest blue-clothed youth being killed by Qin Hao. How could he dare to continue fighting? He broke into a run. What was surprising was that the monkey was also an Essence Soul Realm martial artist. Yellow smoke burst out from his back, and his body turned into fine sand. His entire body shrank into the ground as he used the Earth Escape technique. Like a mound of dirt, it quickly disappeared 1,000 meters away. Roar! Looking at this scene, Brother Dog let out an angry roar. In fact, it didn't expect that the skinny martial artist, who seemed to be the weakest, was actually second only to the blue-robed young man in cultivation. He was ranked second. This skinny man was also very sinister. He might have deceived the blue-robed young man. However, if he escaped and attracted Xinyuan chemical or the coffin bearers, it would be very disadvantageous to Qin Hao's operation. A group of treacherous guys. Qin Hao gnashed his teeth in hatred. He was distracted for a moment and allowed the monkey to escape 1,000 meters away. The opponent's Earth Escape technique was very fast, not much slower than the Waterwind steps. It was sand. The terrain was advantageous to him. Moreover, flying was not allowed in the secret realm. Qin Hao just finished off the blue-robed young man and was a few seconds late. It was impossible for him to catch up. Whoosh! Qin Hao didn't have time to react. However, The dragon shadow in his body was very sensitive. The dragon spirit in his dantian came out and transformed into the face of the Dharma idol. Its face was full of arrogance as it used the waterwind steps. Bu chased after the escaping mound, and the distance between the two of them was getting closer and closer. Qin Hao was stunned by this scene. He couldn't help but raise his fist and encourage. The Dharma idol is mighty. He die. The Dharma idol Qin Hao turned his head and smiled proudly at Qin Hao. With a flash of fire in his palm, the great void sword appeared out of thin air. He held the sword with one hand and pointed the sword at Qin Hao. Then he poured the sword qi into the sliding mound beside him and stabbed it fiercely. At this time, the skinny man, who was curled up in the soil, only felt the shadow of death above his head. He couldn't help but cry out miserably, "I'm dead." Bang! However, before this sword could stab down, the Dharma form suddenly collapsed, and the great void sword disappeared. A dragon spirit let out a sorrowful cry and flew back to Qin Hao's side in shame, disappearing into his dantian. Inside, Qin Hao was stunned. He really learned something. Chapter 1198. Translator. Nioibo Studio Editor. Nioibo Studio becoming the Spear Emperor as Brother Dog entered the refining state. Qin Hao decided to deal with the rest of the fruits first. He circled the beast spirit tree 3 times. The tree was very strong. It would take 5 adults to wrap their arms around it. However, Qin Hao did not pick the remaining 9 fruits. Instead, he took out a weapon that looked like a large steel shovel from his ring and started to dig under the tree. The warrior in blue was right. Digging up the tree and leaving it to grow more fruits would be more valuable. Qin Hao's space ring was big enough for him to plant it. After 6 hours, Qin Hao finally loosened the surrounding soil. Its roots were too deep, and the area it spread was too big. Luckily, Dindu was very experienced in digging in his previous life and created a set of soil-throwing skills. Thus, he was able to dig up the surrounding soil quickly and efficiently. He also took a large amount of soil from the secret realm with the roots and put it into the space ring. After planting the tree in the space ring, Qin Hao released a stream of tranquil water to nourish its roots. Finally, he looked at the 9 golden fruits on the tree with satisfaction before retracting his consciousness back into his body. He wiped the sweat off his face and sat beside the dog spirit. Brother Dog's cultivation must have improved a lot after waking up. Nodding, Qin Hao also prepared to absorb the 12 streams of spiritual energy in his body. He sat cross-legged. A few days ago, Brother Dog was protecting him. Now it was his turn to protect it. However, before absorbing the spiritual energy, there was something he had to deal with. Dragon Spirit Dharma Idol, I have something to discuss. Qin Hao transmitted his voice to his dantian. If you dislike me, just say it. Why are you hesitating? An identical voice replied from his dantian. Even the tone was cold and arrogant, and it called itself I. Qin Hao's eyes twitched, but he did not want to argue with the dragon spirit. He continued, I'm not here to mock you. I just want you to understand that even if you are my Dharma idol and we are of the same origin, we are brothers. Just now, you used the divine artifact without saying anything, which made me feel very insecure. Then what do you want? Qin Hao's cold and arrogant voice sounded again, with a trace of dissatisfaction. It was not that he wanted to resist, but he knew that Qin Hao was going to split the family property with him. To be more precise, Qin Hao wanted to seize the great void sword and not let the dragon spirit use it. Dragon spirit felt wronged. They were all the same person and were equally handsome. Why couldn't he use it? That was too petty. Cough, cough. Qin Hao coughed awkwardly and said, It's not that I'm stingy. In fact, there are a total of 37 spear manuals that have reached the peak of perfection. However, the strongest one is not the ancient spear manual. Instead, it was the time when you peaked at an emperor-level girl in the eastern continent. Shut up. Qin Hao suddenly jumped up and looked around vigilantly. Fortunately, there was no one around. Otherwise, there would be a big problem. Of course, he remembered that there were a total of 37 spear techniques. The reason why he said 36 was because he did not want to talk about the past. In the past, when he peeked at her, he was caught by the girl's father and beaten up. That fat beating was fatal. Qin Hao's face was swollen, and he ran away in a sorry state. It was Denda's biggest stain. Moreover, only Zhang Wu, Han Lingxian, and the four great generals knew about this. Even Wei Wei did not know. Back then, Qin Hao had threatened that if anyone dared to leak it, they would not be brothers anymore. Now that we are no longer brothers, I don't know how that girl and uncle are doing now. Qin Hao lowered his head with a trace of sadness. Uncle's spear skills were world-shaking, but he was indifferent to fame and fortune. Otherwise, the Spear Emperor was Uncle's. Uncle had helped him in Zhang Wu. His and Zhang Wu's battle skills were greatly influenced and guided by Uncle. Zhang Wu, if you dare to touch her family, I swear. Unknowingly, Qin Hao could not help but tear up. He clenched his fists tightly. Zhang Lang, Yu Feng, and the others could see through Zhang Wu's scheme. With that girl's intelligence, she could naturally see through it as well. Uncle was a good person who cared about his feelings. He would definitely kill his way to his Sunset Peak to seek justice for himself. Qin Hao knew that no matter how good Uncle's spear skills were, he would not be a match for Zhang Wu, who had the Sunset God Bow. The consequences could be imagined, but what could he do? There was nothing he could do at the moment. The dragon spirit was affected by Qin Hao. At this moment, it was also silent and emitted a sorrowful aura. Don't worry, I will let his spear skills go down in history. No, it should be us. We will work hard together and let his spear skills shine. His name will go down in history and become an immortal legend. Then, we will kill Zhang Wu with our own hands. The dragon spirit said. At this moment, Qin Hao had already noticed that the dragon spirit had begun to practice Uncle's spear skills. Hey, since the Dharma form is different from the doppelganger, if I summon the doppelganger technique again. Suddenly, Qin Hao, who was thinking nonsense, was frightened by the thought that flashed through his mind. This was completely possible, although releasing a doppelganger technique would weaken the strength of the body. Moreover, the doppelganger technique's combat power was limited. However, under certain special circumstances, if the Dharma form and the doppelganger appeared in front of the enemy at the same time, they could definitely scare the enemy to death. The effect was very amazing. At this moment, Qin Hao was excited. If the Dharma form could also release the doppelganger technique, then the scene would be even more exciting. At that time, when fighting for Dharma forms would appear at the same time. Qin Hao for Dharma forms that had the body of a demigod, the power of 3 souls, and the Dendi who cultivated the indestructible samsara technique. You big idiot, what kind of sweet dreams are you having? My spear technique is about to reach the small success stage. You still have to quickly absorb the 12 streams of spiritual energy. Only when your realm is improved can I not be dragged down by you. After all, I am a beginner stage Monarch. It's just that you are too weak, and I am restricted by you. Qin Hao's angry roar sounded in his body. This roar also woke up Qin Hao, who had fallen into a sweet dream. Unknowingly, the sky had already darkened, and night was about to arrive. Sorry, I will absorb the 12 streams of spiritual energy right now. Qin Hao focused his mind, operated his alchemy technique, and covered the blood essence. He was actually reprimanded by the Dharma form. Who was the real one? Was it the main body? However, I really want to ask you, can you use the doppelganger technique? Qin Hao couldn't calm down until he figured out this question. Yes, and my doppelganger technique may be more powerful than yours. Huh, Cloud Dragon, Sea Covering. The Dharma form replied. Then, a small figure flew into the air from his dantian. Raising the spear, the light was incomparably dazzling. A cloud dragon coiled around the sky extinction spear. At this moment, the vitality in Qin Hao's dantian surged, forming monstrous waves. Roar! The cloud dragon roared and swooped down towards the huge waves below, carrying a shocking momentum. It had a terrifying feeling that it could pierce through Qin Hao's Dantian. Halfway through the cloud dragon's flight, it suddenly ignited and turned into a fire dragon. The flames were blood red. Oh my god, in such a short time, you actually mastered one of the 3 ultimate moves of Uncle's spear technique, Cloud Dragon Sea Covering, and in Qin Hao's eyes widened. As he scanned through, he was shocked to the extreme. How was this Cloud Dragon Sea Covering? It was clearly the fire dragon's fall. The Dharma form actually improved Uncle's spear technique, using the indestructible reincarnation technique as the foundation and integrating the Red Lotus fire and the dragon's soul into the spear technique. The power was vast, and it was even more terrifying than what he saw from Uncle in his previous life. At this moment, Qin Hao was really about to faint. Chapter 1200. The fire dragon submerged into the tumbling Qi Sea. Soon after, the Dantian returned to tranquility. This attack only contained the power of the spear and did not possess any offensive power. Next, Fa Xiang once again immersed himself in cultivation, as if he didn't know what was going on. Qin Hao was ashamed of the weary machine's seriousness, hard work. I can't fall behind either. Qin Hao concentrated on absorbing the 12 strands of spiritual qi greedily. There would be many battles of various sizes in the mystic realm. The latest battle Qin Hao thought it would be within 3 days. The skinny martial artist who had escaped would definitely try to find Xianyuan chemical and lure him here so that he could kill him to vent his hatred. Qin Hao wasn't worried about Xianyuan chemical. He had the ability to fight him, and his chances of winning were very high. However, if they were up against the Nanming coffin bearers, they would have no choice but to run. After all, the blue-clothed youth that he had killed before was actually not weaker than Xianyuan chemical. It was just that his soul source had been restrained by Qin Hao. As for the Southern Sea coffin bearers, it was clear that regardless of realm, origin soul, or foundation, his cards were all above the blue-clothed youth and Xianyuan chemical. Even the old demon, who had broken through to the half-step Origin Emperor realm, might not be able to defeat him. Increasing his strength was an urgent matter. One day and one night, at noon on the 3rd day, the dog spirit woke up. Just as Qin Hao had expected, Brother Dog's strength had improved a lot. It had advanced from the 4th level beast revered realm to the 6th level. In one day and one night, it broke through 2 levels. From the perspective of a human Yuan venerate, this increase was very frightening. This was all thanks to the Spirit Beast fruit. The energy from the Spirit Beast fruit had increased the speed of Brother Dog's assimilation of the inheritance. Of course, it had consumed more than half of the basin-sized fruit. The price was very expensive. Other than Brother Dog, Fa Xiang had also gained a lot. He was able to practice the entire Spear Codex smoothly. As for the specific effects, he would need to test it out in actual combat. Moreover, the 3 strongest attacks of the uncle were only of Dharma Idol. He had only learned the first move, Cloud Dragon Seed Earner. Even if it was just this one move, it was enough to be proud of. After all, this move had been improved by Fa Xiang, and its power had been greatly increased. In comparison, Qin Hao's improvement was the least. He had used up the first 3 strands of spiritual energy. His cultivation base had risen from the initial stage of the 9th level Yuan Monarch realm to the late stage of the 9th level Yuan Monarch realm. He was still some distance away from the peak. How shameful! He couldn't be blamed for this. Qin Hao's physique was too special. Upgrading his demigod physique was even more difficult than upgrading an essence soul realm martial artist, let alone those ordinary martial artists. They were not on the same level. Moreover, the power of 3 souls needed to grow, and the realm needed to be raised. The amount of spiritual energy absorbed was limited in all aspects. He had already worked very hard. I'm really sorry, but I've tried my best. Qin Hao smiled. After a day and night of cultivation, he didn't feel tired at all. Instead, he felt refreshed because of the increase in his cultivation level. Roar, roar. Brother Dog rubbed its head against his body as if it was comforting him. Oomph. Progress is better than no progress at all. However, you need to work harder in the future, just like me. No, he's even more hard-working than me. A voice that belonged to him replied. His attitude was very arrogant and cold. Qin Hao felt warmth from Fa Xiang's cold tone. Fa Xiang was actually doing this for his own good. How could this be? Where did the tree go? Furthermore, there's a huge crater with a radius of more than 500 meters in front of us. What's going on? Qin Hao and the others had just finished their cultivation when a familiar voice sounded. It was undoubtedly the skinny warrior who had escaped. From afar, the skinny warrior walked over in a daze. He was holding a large compass disc in his hand, and his expression was very puzzled. He tried his best to observe his surroundings, thinking that he had remembered wrongly. However, he felt that he had been to this place before. Moreover, the large disc in his hand clearly showed that there were two powerful elemental energies flowing in this place. The aura and smell were very familiar. It was white hair. That's right. However, the skinny man still couldn't find the most iconic and powerful beast spirit tree. At this moment, he was extremely anxious. You dare to play with my young master? I think you're tired of living. With an angry shout, Xianyuan Chemical's gray-clothed subordinate grabbed the skinny warrior's neck and raised him high up. He was about to suffocate. Behind the gray-clothed subordinate was the cold-faced Xianyuan Chemical himself, as well as Captain Yamazaki, whose face was dirty and one of his arms was broken. At this moment, Captain Yamazaki was no longer a coward. When he led his troops to attack Lantian village, he was in an extremely sorry state. He even had the urge to die in his eyes. Thinking about it, their situation was similar to Qin Hao and the old demon. After entering the secret realm, they were scattered by the airflow and landed in different locations. Captain Yamazaki was very unlucky. He met other warriors and was robbed and ravaged. When he was being ravaged to the point where his life was worse than death, Xianyuan Chemical happened to find him and save his dog life. Chapter 1201. Qian Qian. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Suppression and Counterattack. I wouldn't dare even if I had 10,000 lives. The skinny man knelt down. Eldest young master, why don't you let me test his cultivation first? The subordinate in gray asked anxiously. Slap. Xianyuan Chemical gave him a slap as well. You're so impatient. Are you trying to steal my credit and ask my father for promotion and wealth, so that you can deprive me of the opportunity to become the next patriarch? Plop. The gray-robed subordinate looked extremely flustered. He knelt down in fear and raised his fist to swear. I'm innocent. I'm loyal to the eldest young master. Heaven and earth can be my witness. How could I dare to go against my master's heart? Xianyuan Chemical raised his hand again. Captain Yamazaki, the monkey martialist, and the subordinate in gray took 2 steps back, afraid that they would be slapped again. However, Xianyuan Chemical stroked his long hair and said, Get up. I have to kill this person personally. No one is allowed to step forward. If your hands are itchy, go kill that big dog and stew it into a pot of fragrant dog meat so that I can enjoy it after the battle. Ha ha ha. Wonderful. I'll go kill that big ugly dog and stew it for you. Add some spices and MSG to the dog meat so that it's full of fragrance. Yamazaki smiled as he took out the steel spear he had obtained from the divine soldier. Not only spices and MSG, but also chili. I like spicy food. Xianyuan Chemical clenched his fists. Understood. The 3 of them shouted loudly, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws as they surrounded Brother Dog. A 4th level Yuan Venerate, a 3rd level Essence Soul Yuan Venerate, and a peak 9th level Yuan Venerate. Brother Dog, can you hold on? Qin Hao sent a voice transmission secretly. Yuan Qi circulated all over his body as he locked his eyes on Xianyuan Chemical. He was ready to attack at any time with the aqua wind step. Roar! Brother Dog raised his head and roared confidently. Okay, I'll support you immediately after I kill Xianyuan Chemical. Go! Qin Hao used his aqua wind step and weaved through the three of them like a shadow. The wind stirred up caused Captain Yamazaki, who had the weakest cultivation, to spin 3 times. His speed is so terrifying. After Yamazaki stopped, his face was covered in cold sweat. With just a single movement technique, he was definitely not Qin Hao's opponent. Fortunately, he did not act impulsively just now. However, if Qin Hao were to fight against Xianyuan Chemical, only death awaited him. Kill! The gray-robed subordinate roared and pressed his palm toward Brother Dog's head. Captain Yamazaki's steel spear trembled as he attacked fiercely. Sandstorm. You will be exposed to the elements and turned into dried meat. Your death will be exchanged for my glory. This is the value of your life. As he spoke, Xianyuan Chemical's 5 times the gravity enveloped a 500-meter radius. Qin Hao was already trapped. Xianyuan Chemical stretched out his hand and grabbed Qin Hao's neck as if he could really break it. In response, Qin Hao released a glaring sword light. Furthermore, a scarlet light was also released from Qin Hao's body and enveloped a 500-meter radius, completely covering Xianyuan Chemical's gravitational field. After the gravitational field was covered by the light, it completely lost its suppressive effect on Qin Hao. Domain Fleeting Sword. Qin Hao's great void sword Qi flew out of his hand and pierced through Xianyuan Chemical's palm with a puff sound, leaving a bloody hole. Moreover, the sword also cut off a bunch of his elegant hair. How is this possible? Xianyuan Chemical tilted his head, and the sword Qi flew past his cheek, leaving a shocking bloodstain. He found that the gravitational field he released did not have any effect on Qin Hao. Nothing is impossible. The big river sword came from the sky. Qin Hao would never tell him that Xianyuan Huang had risked his life to release 9 times the gravity and ended up dying in his own domain. The indestructible samsara art had completely restrained the Xianyuan family's source soul. Even if Xianyuan Wutian came in person, he could not solve the counter-effect of the divine level technique. At this moment, Qin Hao's great void sword flew out of his hand, rose into the sky, and fell straight down, stabbing into Xianyuan Chemical's head. Qin Hao punched him. 6 times the gravity, earth protection. Xianyuan Chemical was caught off guard and increased the gravitational field again. At the same time, his gravity source spirit drew in the power of the earth nearby, covering his body with a thick defensive shield. 6 times the gravity field, die. Qin Hao also increased the power of his domain, suppressing the gravitational field again. The speed of the sword falling from the sky did not slow down at all. Dazzling golden dragon scales appeared on his fist, and the dragon soul was also activated. Oh no! Xianyuan Chemical was nervous, but there was no time to increase the gravitational field. He hurriedly dodged the sword, but it was a pity that he could not dodge Qin Hao's heavy punch. Puchi! The great void sword stabbed into the ground beside Xianyuan Chemical's left foot. Xianyuan Chemical's head shook violently, and he felt that his brain was about to spill out of his skull. His bulging eyes widened as his body flew out diagonally and rolled on the ground for 100 meters. It's over, Red Lotus exploding flame blade. Qin Hao elegantly picked up the great void sword and activated the second soul power, Red Lotus Overlord Flame. Suddenly, a flame covered the emerald sword's shadow and the earth began to tremble.